To ground, they've done enough, the Swans. Spills, Cleary again to Warner. And Sydney in a classic on a Saturday night. They came from the clouds last week, they hang on this week. The Swans break Port Adelaide Hearts by 3 points.
Well, what a cracking last quarter. What a cracking game, really.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the CREEDCAST on a misty, rainy Tuesday evening here in South Australia. 16th of June, we're recording, of course. Recording our review of, well, it could be the review of the Socceroos beating Turkey. It could be the review of the New York Knickerbockers winning their first championship in 53 years. But no, we are the CREEDCAST, so we're going to talk about Port Adelaide breaking our hearts once again against Sydney in a close one at Adelaide Oval on Saturday evening. A run of heartbreaking results that is now hitting era-defining, generation-defining numbers where they've lost 5 games by less than 3 points, that they're bringing up records of the Western Bulldogs in the 50s and shit like that on some of the talk shows. So that's where we are, Creed fam. Your Port Adelaide Footy Club, of course, going down on Saturday evening, 13-12-90. To Sydney's 14-9-93. What was probably a pretty good game for the neutral to watch, but us sitting at Adelaide Oval in our seats, we're on the edge of our seats and heads in our hands once again as we felt so close yet so far from a result that would have given us the endorphins to get through the weekend against maybe some of our Crows brethren in this state that are starting to believe once again. But good evening, Jamie. It was a wild weekend of sport. We certainly had plenty of highlights for ourselves, but ultimately the most important thing to us just was agonizingly close yet so far once again.
Hello, everyone, and including yourself, Dave. Yes, we once again find ourselves so close yet so far, and to extend upon the generation-defining statistic, it is getting into conspiracy theory territory as well, which is all fun and games, of course. And I agree with your sentiment that for the neutral, it would have been quite the spectacle, as I rewatched the game, and I know you would have, and yeah, seeing it back, knowing the result with emotion removed, it was a good game of football, wasn't it? Unfortunately, though, we have to lick our wounds until draft period comes around, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah, there is a lot of the conspiracies going around. Well, not conspiracies, just articles being written in the wake of that loss about how Port Adelaide are having the perfect season. But apart from the results, but then the fact that it might be perfect for what we need anyway. So it is nice to see.
Lawton has coined it the most ethical tank ever.
Hey, look, history in the making, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're here for. It is funny to see all that stuff because we've been talking about this for probably 6 to 8 weeks now since we started this heartbreaking run of results, which was a couple of months ago now. And now we're finally seeing AFL media catch up to that. There's also, Corey Durden getting a feature on the AFL's Instagram page, which we've been talking about. Shout out to Travis Wakeling. He's been talking about it since probably round 2. So, AFL media is starting to catch up to what's going on at Port Adelaide. But ultimately, it was such a weird gamut of emotions on Saturday evening as the game wound down and we were down by a bit and it was like, okay, this is where it's going to go away. And I start trying to think about, just close my eyes and say Dougie Cochran 3 times and he appears. But then we make the little comeback again. And it's just like, no, I want to win this game. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, you and I are both, dyed-in-the-wool fans. And I guess the ultimate point to start is, regardless of all of the macro things, when we're sitting at these games, we still feel the white line fever. And fuck, it would have been we still just want to get one more of those scalps before the end of the season for this group to they deserve to win one of these. And I know they got that comfortable one over Geelong, but they haven't won one of these close ones against the good teams yet. And you just want to see them get just one to take into the off season with them when that time comes.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all competitive beasts, us football fans, at the end of the day. that's what we love about the sport, and that's what we love about supporting our football club, Port Adelaide Football Club. We strive for that dopamine because, we want to win every game. We're cognizant to the fact or the spoils that await us if we continue on the kind of run that we're on. But ultimately, we want that satisfaction for what we believe in, and I guess what the club has been training to do behind closed doors. Like, they're obviously training to get better, and they're playing to win, of course. So we all want that gratification, that satisfaction that we're on the right track. Although a result like that still suggests that we are on the right track. We're just lack a bit of class and polish, but particularly for the people that make the effort to go to the game as well. And credit to the crowd that rocked up. It was only around 31,000, but personally, I think that opposition supporter crowd number chat is akin to nonce chat.
Mhm.
And
Chris Scott would call it nuffy behaviour, but that's him.
Nuffy behaviour, yeah. Well, I probably had someone in particular at the front of my mind when I meant, drop the word nonce. But I remember, just on a slight tangent, I remember back in the maybe it was the One Club initiative, and the beginning of the "We Are Port Adelaide" slogan. They interviewed fans and put them in promo clips, and I remember one guy saying, like, and it was at a time when Port Adelaide at Amy Stadium wasn't netting a lot of fans, but he basically said, like, it doesn't matter if there's 30,000, 20,000, 10,000, we'll still make more noise than any other club's fans. And that's something that stuck with me ever since, because it's pretty bloody true. And rewatching the game, that Zach Butters goal near the end of the third quarter just typified that. And just the noise that came from the crowd in elation. And it was a sensational goal in its own right, but it was the feeling of the match. It was the ebbs and the flows, and just that eruption of ecstasy in that moment. And to flip back to the crowd number thing, a lot of the missing seats are over the other side from Adelaide Oval members who are, as we know statistically, are predominantly Adelaide Crows fans. So the point originally, though, for those that make the journey to the game, at the end of the day, we've spent hours, depending on where you've come from too, you spent hours making the journey to support the club in an effort to win, and we played so well for so long, and to come home without the chocolates is just really, it's disappointing. And I feel the same feelings as I have throughout all of these close games, particularly maybe discounting the West Coast game. That we were actually pretty filthy with that, because I think we all think that we should have won that. But the other close games that we've come away from with the loss, it's disappointment, it's deflation, it's hyper analyzing the small moments of the game. But ultimately, I'm still proud of my club, because I've been through several phases of down periods of the Port Adelaide Football Club, and resets and rebuilds. And, there's stages throughout our modern history where we would roll over, and we would put up a fight for certain amounts of time, but ultimately the better side would run away with it. And one thing that I truly admire about this side at the moment, a side which was 6 players under 20 years old, and on average younger than Sydney and less games experience, even with their plethora of injuries, as you would know listening to the commentary, we never give in, which is a bit of a early doors Hinkleyism, funnily enough, but it's true. We keep at it. We've rarely been blown out this year. Maybe there's mitigating factors to those two particular instances, but the fact of the matter is we're a resetting side in transition, and we put up a great fight to whoever we come up against, and we play the game throughout the whole 4 quarters.
Yeah, and we did in this one once again. And I think before we get into any line by line stuff and a little bit here or so, it's probably worth looking at some general numbers to kind of flesh out what you're saying about how we played, because I think there's I mean, we talked about in the preview last week, there was a very, very kind of almost Doctor Strange, like there's a very, very specific set of circumstances in which we can win this. Like there's 10,000 circumstances in which we lose, there's one circumstance in which we win. And it was maybe not so as stark as that, but it was, there was limited ways that we could win this match versus, Sydney having just lots of gears and levers they can pull to win the game with their run, the talent they have there out in the field, the experience they have, the run they have. There was a lot of ways for them to win the game. We almost were able to do that against them. They have marginally more of the ball, 340 disposals to 356 their way. Not too much, but the discrepancy majorly in the way the disposals were handled was we have more, almost 40 more kicks than them, but they have 51 more handballs than us. So the handball game was obviously a feature of it. I think I didn't actually look at their end of the game handball meters gain numbers yet, but I know they had 200 at the end of the first quarter, so I assume they ended up getting close to their average of 800 a game. We did have 56 inside 50s to their 47, so a flip from what we've been doing in the past month, maybe where we've been a little bit critical of our ability to get the ball inside 50. It was more about our conversion inside 50, which was still reasonable at times, but they were able to, when the game started going a little bit better for them, when Isaac Heaney came into the game, when their run was getting a bit better, they were able to isolate a few more one-on-ones and a few different areas with their breaks, with their speed to get on the goal side of our defenders and stuff like that. So there was that kind of stuff going on. I'm sure we'll talk about them all when we get to the lines. They had 70 disposal efficiency was just 1 percentage point between us, 71.2 versus 70.2 our way. Efficiency inside 50, very, very similar, 50% for us, 51% for them. Of course, they had 9 less inside 50, so that number increases a bit per inside 50. But clearances, 40 to 30. We even center clearance, 13-13, stoppage, 27-17. So that's one of those areas that we changed. We flipped from the West Coast game where we were smashed at center, but 1 stoppage. We wanted to get a little bit better at the center clearance, and we evened that up. So that's a really good kind of win for us to actually just even that up and obviously hit out 40 to 27. We'll talk about Sweet's game at some point here soon as well. Turnovers, even 71-71. Maybe the way some of our turnovers happened or a little bit, it aided them to get on the break versus us, but the turnover numbers were similar. Possession, like actual time in possession of the ball, was 43% for us, 41% for them. I think that's interesting because it shows that we did control the match fairly well at times. It's just, again, they just needed moments to get clear. They were just better in the small moments and the small margins of the game. So you're looking at all these stats and going, geez, we're pretty close in a lot of areas. I'm just getting down to a couple more of the little niche ones before I throw it back to you. But the score origin, they scored 3 goals more from turnover. We scored 3 goals more from stoppage. Defensive half, they do score well from. They get a 4-goal margin from there. Our score comes from either centre bounce. Our score advantage comes from centre bounce and forward half. So again, it did come down to the areas of the game that Sydney are good in, but we did almost win the game because we tightened up on that stuff as best as we could. And I think that's what we were talking about in the preview, wasn't it? That we need to crack down on what they do well. They're going to do it well at times. We just need to mitigate the times that they do. And geez, with a 3-point loss, we almost got there. We almost were able to beat them at what they do well. They're just a good side.
They are a very good side. And, I think the fact that it's intra-mile stuff, really. Fast and the Furious, Dom Toretto, like, winning's winning. And so we're on the other side of that.
It's that movie, by the way. It's just I'm getting a lot of Instagram ads just as a tangent for a second.
Yeah, that's enough of that.
I'm just excited.
We don't need to talk about how old these movies are.
It's going to be back in cinemas soon, though, Jamie. That's my point. It's coming up. It's going to be.
Well, hey,
turning up in I know my old Billabong hoodie and watching it.
Let the boy watch. but we nearly won. It was a game decided by less than a kick again, but
Mhm.
and it's just worth keeping that in mind, because some of the discussion and outcrying would have you believe that we got smashed, which we didn't. It was, in the end, it was a game of moments. It was a game of inches, whatever cliche you want. But the fact of the matter is we yet again gave ourselves a fantastic shot to beat a team that's up the top end of the ladder. But just to go off the back of your stats, and don't want to just fill everyone's heads with stats, but I made sure to stick around painstakingly through Dean Cox's post-match interview with the telecast team just to see those extra layer stats. And again, this is stuff that kind of fills me with confidence looking to the future. I mean, to go off the back of what you said, time in forward half was 54% to Sydney's 46%. Pressure was fairly even at around 180 each. Our kicking efficiency was 66%, which was 4% better than theirs. Goals per inside 50, though, like this is where things, this is probably the difference in the game. You mentioned that scoring per inside 50 was at around 50% each, but their goals per inside 50 was at 30% to our 23%. Now, I was trying to list off positives, but that's probably, a big one. But ground ball gets 92 to us, 87 to Sydney. Hard ball gets was 21 to 22. So fairly even there. Turnovers, you mentioned, was 71 each, but clangers, they had 11 more than us, which could go to as a result of our pressure we were putting on them. Marks on the lead, 13 to us, 5 to them. Marks then played on 17 versus their 10. So an indicator that we're trying to move the ball with a bit more of offensive flair. And then some team stuff, 6 Shepherds to 5. So really niche. But 19 Smothers to 1 as well in our favour. So some of those stats aren't the ones that people talk about a lot, but some of them show effort, but also some effort to help your teammates out, but effort in the contest, ball movement. We're clearly not the finished product there, but if you look into some of this stuff, and we finished the round still in the top 3 defensive setups or without the ball in the competition. So that's probably an extra layer to go off the back of the key stats that most people would be looking at that suggest that we're doing a lot right. It's just the inexperience or lack of class in some key moments, particularly late when we were challenged, and Sydney were always going to challenge at halftime and then at 3/4 time. The most obvious thing in the world was that we were going to have to cop a few hits to the mouth, and we did. But yet again, we didn't give up. We played the game out right to the final siren, and for that, I'm grateful. I was really annoyed in the moment that we didn't win. But the game plan is coming together. That is for certain, and that's something to take away.
Yeah, that Smothers number is a really good one because there's certain things, those niche numbers, while you sit there and go, oh, these are stats we don't hear about much. It's those kind of things that are building the groundwork of what the ethos of the Josh Carr era wants to be. And we all knew it was going to be some kind of, he's obviously going to come in and coach the game the way it needs to be played within the constructs of the modern AFL, but he also is still going to bring in his ethos of what he expects in between the lines, which is your efforts in your 1%ers and stuff like that. That's like the team is successful teams he played a part of 20 years ago. Obviously, were very highly skilled teams, but the in between the line stuff was efforts and hard ball wins and things of that nature. So those smother numbers, obviously there's some high profile ones that might get featured at some point in this episode that just were really on the night. I was whooping and hollering, and then watching the replay again on TV as I did today, removed from the game and knowing the result, I was still feeling a little buzz of excitement watching those efforts. So, there's some really good numbers there you've brought up that kind of flesh out the groundwork of what's being built with this side in 2026, despite the fact we're not getting the results to get us into any form of postseason contention. Yeah, you mentioned it's fun. This is a review that's been one that's it's been on my mind for the last couple of days because there's so many ways into different areas of that I want to talk about, and some of them are in the line stuff, and some of them are just things that'll come up within the line. So we'll get to the lines in a moment. I think just I guess a key part of it is still just the ball use and the decision making in moments. And I know we texted about one on the night, and this isn't to denigrate Alia's efforts overall. He's still at a borderline All-Australian performance level, but we talked about that one at the end of the first quarter where I think he gathered just a tumbling ground ball inside the defensive 50, but it came to him with plenty of time, whereas essentially it's like he'd taken a mark and he should have maybe picked out a target because there was about 50 seconds to go and the signs were up on the sideline with a minute to go. It's just like time management, but he kind of tried to bite one off down the middle, down the middle towards the wing maybe, and it just kind of floats into a Sydney mark, which actually they ended up bouncing back to kick a goal just before quarter time, which brought it back from what was a 10-point lead to, I think, 4 points at that point. And kind of like, I think after that, so much hard work and an incredibly dominant first quarter, you kind of go, geez, we deserve to be by at least 2 goals. And that might have been maybe giving a little bit to Sydney, and the fact we're only up by 4 points, kind of, you just thought, shit, that's a real let off for Sydney. And obviously we still were able to frank that and build up a lead in parts of the game later on, but it still just felt like one of those moments. There's another one, just skill and execution wise, which is the difference because I think Sydney were biting these ones off better. Kane Farrell had a really nice kick across kind of from the back flank of the center square towards the front half flank of the center square so the back flank to the forward flank, diagonal across the square to Jace Burgoyne out in space, had Akers. A little bit of pressure was coming onto him. I can't remember if it was Georgiades and Durden were goal side of their defenders, and all Burgoyne needed to do was just get a kick that had enough penetration to go over the top, but he kind of floated it because I think he felt some pressure coming onto him and just rushed the kick a little bit, and it kind of just floated for an intercept mark, whereas if we know Burgoyne can kick that far, it's just moments like that. We just didn't execute those moments well, whereas whenever because that was a rare moment where we actually had space in our forward 50 to find maybe some space for our forwards to work, whereas often we would kick into congestion and things like that. Whereas whenever Sydney had that opportunity half on the break, they were finding one-on-ones where they were getting the benefit of some possibly dubious umpiring decisions, 50-50 defender on forward. Yeah. This is a biased podcast. I can just say it's bullshit. But we'll talk about the defense, the two lines in a moment. But yeah, that was the difference for me. It was just there was some execution moments, and the Jace Burgoynes are those kind of players are the ones that are just needing maybe to take that next step now. That's really the difference. I think Simon, who sent through his usual extensive thoughts on Instagram, and we shout out to Simon as usual, he kind of put out there just I think he said it really comes down to execution for him, and whether it's like, do we have the other players, dud players or something like that to that effect. And my point to that is, no, I think there's a certain percentage of players in this side that will not be there the next time we're contending for a grand final. That is just the reality of the AFL. We're in a rebuild period. There will be some movement before we get to that point again. But I think some of these ones, like your Jace Burgoynes, who I do have a lot of faith in still, they're just that penny drop for the next level of their game still needs to come. And that was one of those moments where I'm just like, there's still just that needs to come for them. And as an overall side, that's kind of the difference between winning and losing these ones because this is when you're getting to a generational pattern of close losses, there is a composure element to it and we talked about it when we reviewed Hawthorn. We've talked about it when we reviewed the Crows game. We've talked about it a lot, the composure in those late moments and figuring out the situation of football is where we're falling down. And that is just experience in understanding the moment and experience in understanding how to dispose of the ball in certain moments as well.
Yeah, just on Jace, I thought he had a good game from a teammate point of view. He got his possessions. His stat sheet looks pretty good, except for one pretty important part, and that's disposal efficiency. And it is worth noting that there was a point in the season where he was the number one kick inside 52 a mark that we've discussed on this podcast. But I just thought he was a bit lax with his disposal on the night. He did all the hard work to get the ball, but then when it was his time to find a target or not, he just, was a bit blasé, which I'm sure his mind was spinning. But just a bit disappointing. But you're right. Like it is some of those execution pieces. It's the not being able to pick up the ball when we're on the fringe of 50 and all we need to do is get it in to put Sydney under pressure, and it's handballing to a teammate who's already got an opposition player hot on their collar, such as that Lockie Jones moment on the wing. And it all comes down to experience for me across the board. And the second half, but the last quarter in particular, did seem very much like the Hawthorn game. It seemed like we'd spent so much effort. I mean, in that game, we had to correct a pretty poor start, and it was quite warming that we started like a house on fire. We just couldn't convert, which, again, that's another part of it. Putting teams away when you've got that serious momentum. So unlike the Hawthorn game, we started well. We were ahead for most of the game, but then the fourth quarter is when Sydney lifted, and then our wheels looked like they were starting to turn a bit slower, and we started a lot more kicking in hope and some rash like bombs and things like that. The effort was still there. We just weren't as clean as we had been at more stages throughout, particularly the first half, but the first three quarters.
Yeah. I think some experience, and again, it's just experience and time will, with this group and allowing them the time to build, I think will help as well. It's interesting. Again, I started the episode kind of half, jokingly talking about the New York Knicks championship win, but I actually find that an interesting comp because we see the San Antonio Spurs in that NBA championship series that was won 4-1 by the Knicks. The Spurs led that series 74% of game time. Of the 5 games, the Spurs led, but they lost 4-1 and lost the series. And it was, every game was, and I think Jalen Brunson, of course, won the MVP for the series and incredible player for the Knicks. And he kind of joked that, we just started playing at 9 p.m. every night or whatever, like something across that name. And just like the Spurs will get out to, and Spurs are a similarly young team with obviously Wembanyama is kind of like, you could comp him to one of our young stars, whoever you want to be. Like they're an incredibly young team. And whereas the Knicks are a lot more experienced, built with a few different guys signed from other teams that have been around longer, spent a lot of time together, have gelled, and they were just able to, they knew they could grind the longevity of every game. They knew they had the gas in the tank to get through to the game and fight it out to the end. And the Spurs were running out of gas early in the fourth quarter. And it feels like they didn't understand how to manage the moments. And there was 4 games that they led for 74% of the time and lost to lose a series. And we've lost 5 games by 3 points or less, where we've had a fair bit of good possession in the games and had a lot of time with the ball, but just haven't been able to figure out the back end of the game and maybe have run out a little bit of gas in teams with more experience and strategy, experience in their strategy. Like, the Dean Cox experiment is young, but it's 2 years in with a lot of experience there. And they were able to kind of execute the way they wanted down the stretch. Like they did just stick to what they were doing, and Heaney builds into the game and Chad Warner builds into the game because those two had quiet first halves but came out stronger in the second half, and just experience tells. And you've got to take your moments within that. And again, it's only 1 kick. That's all it was. So we're going to dissect this game line by line in a moment. But again, it is worth remembering it's just 1 kick. If we just kick that one more kick, then the review is taking a completely different kind of energy, even though we're going to be going into it with a fairly positive and constructive mindset, as per usual, that we like to do. Would you like to start in the forward line today? Because I think there's an interesting discussion there.
I think you would, so let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like leading the witness a little bit, but I know we've had I'm going to start with this with, again, a shout out to Simon who sent through his thoughts. And I thought this is an interesting, because I think this is one of the areas that I found really interesting on the night, because a lot of it happened like in line with where I'm sitting in the ground. And the Simon sent through a message kind of talking constructively, critically about the sameness of Todd Marshall and Jack Whitlock in the forward line. And it's not to say I'm giving up. Obviously, not giving up on Jack Whitlock at all. We have very, very high hopes for a future, and not giving up on Todd Marshall at all. But I think it's an interesting discussion with how this game was played. It's the same, because it often felt like our structure was like they were often, there's either one or the other of them coming out to try to collect the ground. You're talking about fumbly ground balls at the top of the 50. Like, it was often one of those guys, and it just felt like that's the wrong person that's in that situation. And it felt like we were seeing that a lot. And so the structure of who was coming out and they're a little bit, the way the game was played, they were playing kind of a similar role. Like Whitlock was finding a little bit more of it, I think, at times. But again, he wasn't finding the opportunity to score. His opportunities to score have drastically dropped in the last few weeks. And again, that's just kind of the way we're playing a little bit as well. And Mitch Georgiades' opportunities to score, while he's still getting them, have dropped drastically in the last few weeks as well. So everyone's finding it harder to find consistent scoreboard opportunity. But I'm not sure yet about Todd Marshall and Jack Whitlock in the same forward line. Again, it has to be said that we were playing against one of the top teams in the competition, but it wasn't a promising sign in how they played together, or how we not so much the way they played together, just the way the structure was, because you just need a little bit more dynamism there, and we won't get, unless Horne-Francis was down there, or obviously Durden had a good one as well. It's just like, out of those two, it's not great that those two come out of the game with 0 goals, obviously, and really not much of a scoreboard opportunity at all for either of them.
No, certainly not Whitlock. He was spending, obviously, more time around the ball, being the second ruck option, which happened fleetingly throughout the game. And funnily enough, I think it was Stuart Dew actually had some quite positive things to say about him, more so in that second ruck role. But obviously he's picked as a forward, so you need to be kicking goals. There was that one moment where I'm pretty sure he marked it, but Georgiades ended up spoiling it out of his hands, and I'm not sure we even scored from that moment. And I think there was 1 or 2 moments where Todd Marshall dropped a couple of marks. Maybe it was just one, but the opportunities are limited and the pressure is going to quickly rise. Shout out to Alan Dowler on Facebook, who had a similar way of thinking as Simon as well, just about Todd being in no man's land a little bit. His year's just not working out, because what has it been? 3 weeks now he's been a dedicated forward, or 3 games, should I say. It may have been the Carlton game that was his first foray back into that realm. And that they just quite simply need to offer more. And at the moment, there is at least one person putting their hand up for selection below them. So, selections will be interesting this week, but I kind of think that one of, if not both of them, will probably still get the backing of the coaches. But things need to turn around quickly, because Georgiades needs some aerial support. And Sydney's defence was probably their weakest line on the weekend as well. Even though they had the experience with their outs, they still had the experience of Cunningham and Hamling come in. Hamling, who's a premiership defender, by the way, which we discussed in our preview. And on George, he had 5 shots on goal, but he also had 2 goal assists. So I think he actually had a pretty good game considering the circumstances, and considering that he is having to continue carrying the load in terms of key position forwards. Obviously, the Smalls are doing their bits and pieces around the place, and the likes of Durden, like you said, which is a given at this point in time. But also Berry would have liked his goal behind Ledger to be swapped around, obviously, and it very well should have been, if not 3 goals straight, to be fair. They're doing their thing. But I mentioned on the preview show that we need to lift our goal contributions from, say, like 7 or 8 people to 10, 11, 12 to really give ourselves the best opportunity to win games of football, but also give us an opportunity not to be in 1-goal games, getting ourselves ahead. I'm pretty sure Stuart Dew actually said a similar thing to that as well, just getting ahead, but actually having a buffer so that we don't have to worry about it. And that comes down to conversion, but also contributors on the night or on the day. Because particularly with Todd, as a senior player, you can't just simply take a defender and keep them busy. Like, it's all well and good for Jack Whitlock to get the experience at the top level, and he also needs the output. We have no golden passes at the end of the day, and although we are
anymore
selecting
right?
and selecting and playing with an eye to the future, we're trying to win games of football, and putting a score on the board is exactly how you do win games of football. So, but he probably gets a bit more leniency and potentially keeping a defender busy, in quotations, more so than Todd, just due to experience. Because when we talk about, our lack of experience being a factor, to what degree is up to, is in the eye of the beholder. But Todd is an experienced player, so he needs to be getting the X's and O's right more often than not. I don't really expect perfection from him, considering that he's had an Achilles injury. He spent a whole preseason training as a defender, played the majority of his season so far as a defender, and then being swung back forward. And although he is a forward by nature, and like historically across his whole career, it's just that lack of continuity. But at the end of the day, if you're a senior player on the field, you need to be contributing.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this forward line is you look at it and the spread of goal kickers is actually okay for what was a tight, 14 goal to 13 game. We have, horne-francis kicks his too, which he's a hybrid, so we like that from him. Georgiades kicks a couple, Durden kicks a couple, so good start there. Durden, and by the way, speaking of Georgiades' goal assist, that one over the top for Durden for his Durden second was just fucking exquisite. Tommy Cochran back in his second game pops up with a beautiful goal. I was right behind that kick, and I texted you on the night. I was like, that was one of the more beautiful kicks I've seen in recent time. Just the way it swung through, just perfectly. Butters and Berry pop up with their couple. Obviously, Xavier Bammett we'll talk about when we get to the midfield a little bit more, but pops up with a nice one as well. And Jordan Sweet pops up with 2, but you want that to be the if your ruckman gets forward for a couple, you want that to be the cherry on top of maybe. Even if in a tight game like this, like Whitlock and or Marshall pop up with a couple with the amount of inside 50, like you have 56 inside 50s and 13 marks inside 50, like those guys should be getting a goal each at least. You just think when you think about and again, we'll talk about the midfield and some of the forward 50 entries and how the game was being played. But you still just hope there was a couple of marking opportunities. You did say Whitlock might be a bit unlucky with one that gets spoiled by Georgiades. But when you look at the other end and see Curnow finds a way to kick his 3, Logan McDonald, who played some time on the wing, finds a way to kick 3, aided and abetted by umpires. We'll get to that. But Amadi pops up with 1, and then theirs gets fleshed out. But theirs was fleshed out after their big forwards got theirs, basically. So they kind of, and again, we're talking about a goal that's just a kick in it, but you do just sit there and go, God, you just want someone to go, because Georgiades is finding it a bit harder. He still gets his 5 shots. There's probably one he should kick, but he otherwise does reasonable, because there's one of those misses is from general play, and I can't remember. I'm just blanking on the other one. I know there's one that
there was this. I think they might have been both in the first quarter, or
there was a snap.
Maybe not,
because
there was the snap. Yes, there was the snap, and then there was The one where he was kind of being held and he was just kind of trying to bobble the ball with one hand and almost kick it over his head, which
Yes,
was a
Yeah, so you
very
really-
low percentage kind of shot at goal. So are they genuine shots? What's the X score on that type of thing? I'm not too sure.
Yeah. So you probably say on the day he's actually had a reasonable day based on his opportunities. He should get a free kick at one point where he's like I don't know what umpires are looking at
Clearly.
when there's an arm right around him. He's two arms in the air, and the defender, people watching YouTube can see this, but there's the defender's arms like right around him like this. His arms are up in the air, and he's like going,
He's not
"What's
even
going
able to
on?"
jump.
Whereas down the other end, you've got 50-50s and Harrison Ram, just because I guess he's a second gamer, just gets the lack of doubt. Sorry, the lack of the benefit of the doubt. It's just that was, I think I can't remember if I responded to someone in text or on one of the pages, but I just said I don't have much problem with umpiring good or bad if it goes both ways, but there was clear examples of completely different calls at both ends, and we were getting the lack of benefit in our forward line versus them getting a little bit of benefit in their forward line, which was quite frustrating as well, because that should be a free kick to Georgiades right there and then he's got a third goal, and all other things being equal, sliding doors, butterfly effect, and all that, then we win the game. So it's just it was frustrating.
Well, that's exactly right. That was the key to us winning or losing. But I mean, we strive for shots at goal from inside 30 meters, particularly with George, because he's generally taking them from further out. And that was that. And I mean, again, Sydney had a lot more shots from inside, from closer range than we did. So again, the percentages of conversion flow on from there. But you're absolutely right. I was fucking ropeable on the night. I'm pretty sure the commentary team were flabbergasted, and maybe even it was Mark Ricciuto who mentioned that the umpires didn't really have much control over the game. It was a dog's breakfast at certain points in time, and it was just a joke. And I made my feelings and opinions in that regard well known from row A of the Foss Williams stand. But we're a Port Adelaide podcast full of bias. I do think they benefited from a couple, if not more, gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah. And just to finish on that forward line, though, we didn't get the benefit of it in our, like, that's where the two ends, there was just officiating was different at both ends, and that's where the problem comes from, is like if it's officiated the same both ends, it's good or bad. And I think there was a couple of calls we got our way at times, but they were like weird ones, like the arc one on the sideline where the commentators were like, "Oh, that bounced off that Butters' boot," but no one saw it. It's like, well, that one we're getting a little bit too ticky-tacky with that shit anyway. I think it should just be a clear disposal anyway, but that's neither here nor there for the moment.
As do I.
But yeah, it's frustrating. But otherwise, the forward line, we got good inside 50s and good. We took marks inside 50 again. It was just getting those key opportunities inside 30 that you were talking about. We're still just struggling to get those. A few goals that we kicked from inside 30. Well, there was the one, obviously I talked about the Georgiades, really, really nice dime of assist over the top to Durden to take his one-handed mark. And then, Butters gets off for a really nice goal inside. But and Durden gets Durden's first was a nice set of play. Have some quick hands and whatnot to get a goal right from the line basically. But those are kind of those magic moments ones. We're wanting to get set shots within 30, and we're just still not getting those, and that's still ultimately where we're ending up in this situation. I will just mention, just because we have to for every episode, and being that we're talking about the forward line, X score says we should have won by 8 points. So take that what it is. I don't all year it's just been the X score ladder is that we have four more wins than we do in reality. So it does show that we did generate the opportunity to win this game based on some key metrics say that we should have won this game, all things being equal. So, we've let ourselves down a little bit, and maybe, Sydney got the benefit of a couple of calls as well. So, anything else in the forward line? I think that my major thing was just the structure of it was a little bit off, I think. But I think there were some good signs there as well. It's an interesting one when you're talking about a game that was lost by 3 points.
It is difficult, and yeah, I guess just just to round it off with a positive, like it may not just be necessarily the forward line, but our forward movement was like we started. It's funny, we had that serious block of the year where we were kind of just flabbergasted, to use that word again, on our slow starts. But to start like we did, we couldn't have started much better from a team point of view. And it was a real team effort that got the ball rolling for us. And while, the conversion wasn't there, I mean, the heat was on. And like we finished the game with 10 tackles inside 50, which actually is our season average. And we lose that by 2. Sydney's season average is about 12 as well. So, yeah, mate, yeah, we're all a bit like we keep getting the wind knocked out of our sails from a traditional football spectator point of view, but yeah, I just wary of taking away from what was I think largely a fantastic team performance that was shot down by, we shot ourselves in the foot at stages, and in the moment, yeah, just filthy that could happen. But in reflection, you understand why, and you cop it, and like, yeah, the sliding doors of football is amazing, and but the thing that we wanted coming out of the mid-season break was an evolve our forward movement and forward offensive play to evolve, and I think we've seen a bit more of that over the last couple of games. There is just question marks on a couple of people. Their form is wavering, and we just need that extra. I mean, yeah, we just need the extra goal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think discounting Todd and unfortunately Jack Whitlock, I think the forward mix performed as Darren Reeves would have hoped they would.
Yeah. There's some good as you said, there's some good intelligent movement down there as well. So I think it's good to acknowledge that there is some things that have we're definitely seeing the kind of advances in this year and in Josh Carr's first year, and of course Darren Reeves in that coaching group as well. Just the intelligent movement, the inclusion of Durden. Joe Berry, I think, was really good. Just I think that's probably the one point I wanted to finish on as you were talking. I remember just trust that you're a good kick in that situation at the back end. I'm not going to sit here and get into the semantics of should the modern AFL and players going around the corner, because so many are doing it. So it's not a Joe Berry thing, but it was interesting. Ken Hinkley in the commentary said, just do the thing you've been doing for 18 years. And I think I can't remember if it was Rashudo or someone else pressed him on and said, do you think that's just an AFL thing? And I think he kind of said, yeah, I think these guys don't do this stuff until they get to the AFL. And there is whatever analytics you want to talk about, and players like your Ginnevans on podcasts and stuff will talk about, the science of going around the corner and, cutting the window of, the mistake window or whatever it is. But you've still, I think Jason Dunstall's talked about it too. You just get I think when he kind of facetiously said, okay, I'm taking advice from a bunch of guys that have kicked 11 goals this year versus my 1,000, like Dunstall says, whatever you're going to do, you've just got to kick the goal. And so too many of these guys are messing these ones up. So we love Joe Berry, and I just think he's an exquisite. He's a very, very good kick, apart from some of his kicks for goal. I think that's just a mental thing about being in front of the big sticks and figuring out what you've got to do in that moment.
Yeah,
being a good left footer, you just would have thought in that situation, just go back and take the set shot. And if he'd missed the set shot, I think we still get it. We still groan, but we go, oh, well, fucking Georgiades does that. Other guys do that, like whatever. But when you miss one around the corner like that, it just looks worse as well. They look great when they go in, but it just looks worse when you kind of belly the ball a little bit and it floats through. And you could tell by his reaction, he was kind of pretty gutted by it in the way he reacted, and great for the guys to get around him. And whatnot. And we're probably going to talk about some more young players that guys got around a bit in moments of mistake in a moment. But just
You mentioned that it looks great when it comes off. I don't think, people snapping from 10 to 15 meters out pretty much straight in front. No one remembers them. Like, no one cares.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah,
So,
it looks good. Like,
yeah.
it's
just
more,
kick it. Yeah.
I think it's more probably my
And again,
relief
like,
that they've put it through. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if anything. And then it's all forgotten in the aftermath. Like, you remember this, like, unfortunately to bring up an opposition goal, but Heaney's, for example, where it was from the pocket, people remember those snaps, and you do have a license to snap from those acute angles. But yeah, like,
hell of a routine he goes through, by the way. It's actually like I was watching it, watching it in person and then watching it on a replay. I was like, he's got a pattern down. Like, that's the thing. He's practiced that.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing in that specific moment. So yeah.
Angling up the ball, bit rugby like. But I tend to agree with Ken. Like, just kick the ball. Like, if you were running in and you had a shot from that point, and I mean, this is the thing that I admired about Jay Schultz, and I'm not on an island like that. The thing that I loved about his set shot was once he got into his rhythm, it was essentially like he was running into goal. Obviously not with speed, but it kind of made it so that his set shot routine wasn't really a set shot routine. It was just, it was like a bit of a shrug of the shoulders, like loosening of the shoulders, and then he ran it goal and kicked it straight more often than not. Obviously, fan favorite Schultzy, and everyone wants him to come back. But that's a discussion that's been had time after time. But yeah, I'm in the group of just kick it, just do a drop punt. Yeah, I would say play the percentages, but then professional footballers in the modern age would say, oh, actually, if you kick a snap, you're actually more likely to kick it where you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is like a lot of these guys are doing. I don't know what analytics or things they're looking at in set shot kicking, where they're going around the corner gives you like you less chance of or shortens the window of mistake or whatever vernacular they use. And I know there's a term, and I'm just
what I will say.
What
I will say though, again, like with fan outrage and putting the blame on people, like there was still 12 minutes to go after he kicked that. I remember reading the some of the comments in regards to that shot, and that being that being the moment that cost us the game. And I was like, fuck, was it that close to the end of the game that he did that? But yeah, I'm wondering, like, there was still plenty of time. You just obviously, in an ideal world, he kicks that goal, momentum. We all understand it. Again, that's why I'm apprehensive to, in any of these close losses, really put it down to any one moment. Obviously, later in the game has the recency and probably the more tangible effect on it because there's less time to correct a mistake. But there's so many things that happen in a game of football that I think it's unfair to put it on one person in one moment. In a game chock full of moments, that was just unfortunately a pretty ugly one. That and when you get a 52, like, I'm all about hammering home advantages when it comes to one-on-one and in the contest, player v player. But when you get a 50, you got to make the opposition pay. You've got to make absolute sure that you rub their nose in it. And it was an opportunity gone begging. And we'd given up, 2 or 3 50-meter penalties as in our own regard. So it was an opportunity to get one back. And unfortunately for Joe, it just didn't happen. But again, I don't feel any less confident of where he would where he's going in his career, and I am confident that if he gets that shot again, whether it be this year, whether it be next year, or years down the track, he'll be nailing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's 20 years old and he's having a very, very nice little season. He's just those are little, again, those are the things we're talking about, the experience that comes in those moments, whether it be moments kicking for goal or moments in disposal in the middle of the ground for different players, that it's going to come with experience and time. So
what would Robbie do is what you have to ask. Would Robbie Gray kick around the corner?
I don't think Robbie Gray ever even he was just a classic drop punt for almost anywhere unless it required a snap because it was, a Nahini spot. But you think about that kick against Carlton, it was, these days some of those players might go around the corner.
Against Carlton.
So much. Yeah, it's
what would Robbie do?
Yeah,
that's all they have to think about.
Yeah, no, it's like Laura Branigan's self-control, and it's like, in the night, I think of Robbie. Anyway, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, so maybe let's go to the defense first before we finish off on the mids, because we've talked about that dynamic opposite between the umpiring between the two arcs, so we can talk about the defense because on the night, I watching the game, and this is what I love. Regardless of whether we win or lose, particularly in close games, when we get smashed by major margins, the replays can be tough no matter what. But the replays of these kind of games, even though we know what's coming, is still there's a lot of benefit to it. On the night, I was a little bit unsure of how we were performing, but actually watching the replay, I was actually reasonably okay with even Harrison Ram on the night. I was like, is he getting beaten? Is he really getting beaten? He didn't look as bad on replay, and not that I thought he looked bad on the night. Sorry, that's the wrong way to talk about it. I just was a bit unsure of it because obviously I'm watching live and I'm caught up in the moments of the game. I'm not getting the benefit of a slow motion replay because I'm off. I'm watching screens and watching everything that's going on in the field live at the game. And Ram got just caught out a couple of times by the Sydney ball movement catching us exposed, and he just the opposition players worked him well, but I don't think he actually got absolutely burnt. He's just, maybe a touch of a lack of experience being a second gamer and 20 years old. And, and then I think he was unfortunately at the back end of a couple of dubious 50-50 decisions that while I can understand, like we get them our way sometimes as well, I'll be objective in saying that. But on this night in particular, we didn't get him our way down the forward 50. And that's why I wanted to bring up the defense now, because there was one where it was Ram and Amadi both had a little bit of each other's jumper, and I'd argue that Amadi was. I think I texted you on the night and said Amadi's trying to take Ram's jumper home too early, or something of that nature. And it felt like he, there was a little bit of benefit of the doubt that didn't go his way. A couple of the 50-50, a couple of the one-on-ones that he, Logan McDonald, kind of just used his experience to take a mark on him. We're also benefited by the fact that the Sydney just got their ball movement going quickly and isolated him one-on-one more or less. And I thought he actually did some nice things in the night. Certainly got some experience. Was exposed a little bit, but he was also exposed against one of the best sides in the competition. And I actually think he held up okay without having an exemplary night. I think he's going to be well better for the experience. And, he might be carrying a fair bit of soreness, but I'm glad both he and we'll talk about Bammett when we talk about the midfield maybe a little bit more, but I'm glad both of them started on the field.
What I admired particularly out of this game, and in particular our younger players, was they made their mistakes, and this even is applicable to Joe Berry. They made their mistakes throughout the game. But what encouraged me was the next contest and seeing them attack the next contest. It's for footballers and what we want to see as spectators and fans of our football clubs. You want to see second and third efforts. If the first effort doesn't work out, what are you doing in your second and third efforts? And I feel that all of our young players. I mean, and again, this was a good game of football, a really good game of football for the neutral, of course, and for Sydney supporters. But something that was a characteristic across the whole night was when the ball's in contest, whether you've made a mistake or not, you're attacking the next contest just as hard. And Joe Barry did that, and Harrison Ram also did that. Yeah, he was caught out. I noticed after halftime, and I don't know whether it was by design or it's just the flow of the game, but he did seem to, or Sydney did target the forward that was on Ram a bit more. And again, I don't know if that was by design, but it definitely felt like a tactic after halftime live. And then, yeah, obviously watching the replay, particularly Logan McDonald, because like you said, he was on a wing for a lot of the time, and then he found himself 1-on-1 versus Ram in their forward line a bit more, and he found the benefit of those goals. And again, we're just nuffies on a podcast. I'm just a nuffy here talking about football that I've spectated for a long time. But I take stock in the people who've actually been involved in the industry. And, when Ken Hinkley, for example, says that, Harrison Ram was in the right position I think there was one occasion with Logan McDonald. He was playing in front, but the ball movement just happened to be that the ball traveled further than probably he was set up for. And I know that if he was defending back shoulder and the ball came in and Logan McDonald got a bullet on his chest out on the lead, our fans would have been admonishing the fact that he wasn't playing in front. Play in front. You go to a game of football, you hear it more times than you should. Play in front. So, and then there was the other one where he was playing back shoulder because the contest in the midfield was a bit closer to Sydney's forward 50, and it was a bit more of a contest. So more likely to be a high ball in. But in actual fact, I can't remember. I think he was it Hayden McLean? He got a mark on the lead, and someone did actually hit him on the chest, but it was a really good kick. But it was an equally good enough mark. And again, being an apologist Hinkley sexual that I am, Ken Hinkley also said, there's not much more that Harrison Ram can do there. He stuck at him. He closed the space. He got the hand through. It was just a good mark. And for a guy in game 2, I think there's more than enough evidence to persist and to see something that will contribute to our list build and transition our key defenders as time goes by. But then, to highlight his 2 tackles in the third quarter is just indicative of that continued effort that I was speaking about earlier that he got rewarded for. So the last thing you want to see, and it happens because young players are young players and they're young men. That's what we forget as nuffies who all this stuff has passed us by. But these are young men under the hottest pressure, the elite level. They can hang their heads. But again, something that I admire out of the night was no one gave up. They stuck at it until we got it back, until they could effect a free kick, or, holding the ball, a tackle, a reset, a stoppage. Whatever they could do, they kept at it. And again, another encouraging sign for mine coming out of the night in regards to particularly our youngest players.
Yeah, they're just normal men. The defensive effort overall was actually, when you look at the numbers, like the overall team numbers of their marks inside 50 for Sydney this year, they've been taken fourth. Like, this is the best offensive side in the comp this year so far. They're scoring almost 120 points a game. Obviously, we kept them to 93, so there's already a tick there. Marks inside 50, they took 8. They usually take 14 on average this year. So we were able to mitigate some of those numbers, and obviously the inside 50 numbers overall were just far less than their number this year as well. I'm just scrolling up to that. They're at just under 62 inside 50s a game. We get held them to 47. So obviously all of this you look at and go, well, we still lost the game. So, there is that. But it means that the structure and the game plan we went in with and the picking of Harris and Ram and all that stuff almost worked against one of the top two sides in the competition, who obviously with all the buys and stuff like that and all those things going on, what the actual ladder is up to you. But with this win, Sydney go equal top, just, second on percentage. So this is a very, very good football side that's doing a lot of damage to a lot of teams. And I think they beat Richmond by, almost 20 goals without Brodie Grundy. We'll talk about that midfield stuff in a moment. But this is a team doing a lot of damage to a lot of teams. And we kind of went toe to toe with them, punch for punch, in a kind of a proper good boxing bout of a game. And that includes the defensive effort. Alir and Asava had their moments that, Asava dropped a mark that led to, I think, was that the Rowbottom goal that kind of almost helped them seal it. I think Asava had a chance to mark that one, maybe should have, didn't, but I think he had his moments in the game. He had a tough game against Kerno. That's a tough matchup here. He obviously won it last year, but Kerno did kick 0 goals 3 last year, which helped make that look good. But I think it's just a tough matchup. And Charlie Kerno's it's so funny. There was a Sydney fan a couple of rows behind me. I think when Kerno kicked his first one, and I'd overheard them discussing like Kerno's year so far, so to speak. And then like Kerno kicks that first one, and he just kind of paraphrased James Earl Jones's Mufasa, like in The Lion King, I think he just said something like, Kerno, he's starting to believe, or something like that. Just I heard it in the back of my, like, behind me. I just started chuckling to myself. I was like, these fucking guys. Like, just good
Lion
good
King
crowd
at the
banter.
football.
Yeah. He's starting to believe. Yeah, this is good stuff. But I liked, we were talking about, obviously we're talking about the maybe not the negatives, but just the indifference of Todd Marshall's year with the fact he's been moved around a bit. A player that's been moved around a bit that's gone the other way, Darcy Byrne-Jones, just really, really, the amount of times, and I noticed it on the night, but then watching the replay, the amount of times he read the ball well, just incredible pace to get to the get front position and take an intercept mark and get the ball going forward again. I thought he's having a really, really nice little patch of form. I guess, the biggest is Darcy Byrne-Jones being one of those scapegoats of social media at times, is the biggest credit you can have to say to him. And maybe my algorithm's just blocking things out, but I haven't seen too much, denigration of his position in the side of late. And I think that's probably the biggest credit you can give to Darcy Byrne-Jones. Obviously, we're big DBJ fans, but I think he's having a really, really nice patch of form, having gone back there. And, his leadership's kind of helping this defense play this kind of football that they are at the moment.
Yeah, the lack of criticism is, amazing. In actual fact, I'm seeing praise. I think we brought it up. I think I brought it up last week. There was someone who reached out to us about DBJ, hoping that he'd get his plaudits, and yet again he puts in another shift, and it is can you call it a renaissance? I mean, he is in his 30s, so and we didn't think he was doing too badly as a forward from a score involvement and pressure player. And the fact of the matter was he was out of form, and Ken said that. I think it was Mark Rasciuto who asked the question, like, to expand on why they moved him forward. And Ken, kind of treaded into it lightly, but then kind of just said, but he was just out of form. And he was. It was for an extended period of time, and he was probably being not carried, but perhaps he wasn't facing as heavier scrutiny because he was still living with that all-Australian kind of blazer that gave him some credits.
He brought it up in the broadcast. Sorry to cut in, and just like as a side note to that as well. And we're already forgetting about the subs era because we're getting so used to just the 5 on the bench. But Ken brought up that he was actually sub in the game, and they brought him up to throw him. They brought him on and just chucked him up forward against Sydney, actually, in a game, I believe that was at the SCG. And I do remember talking about it back then on the podcast and be like, fuck, DBJ at forward. Okay, let's go. Like, because he had a really good, I think,
I think he
quarter
kicked
and
a couple
half
of
maybe up
goals.
forward. Yeah. He injected himself in the game and actually had a tangible impact on the result. And then from then on, he was a forward for a couple of years. It's like, but as to your point, I think to your point, it is a renaissance because he's having a renaissance as a backman after losing his spot there for a couple of years.
Yeah, so full credit to him because he wouldn't have trained in the preseason as a defender. So this is probably like the opposite side to the argument with Todd. I mean, I gave him all the outs of the inconsistency, but DBJ is probably showing the other way that if you spent most of your career in one area of the field, that you can get back to it. And so again, to go back to Todd, he needs to use DBJ as inspiration in a way, and just get back to doing the thing that you've been doing for the majority of your career. In Todd's regard, kick goals, but to move back to DBJ because he deserves spotlight. Some of the most comfortable, if that's the right word, viewing of DBJ, to put it that way. Like, there was a period of time there where you kind of didn't know what was going to happen, and disposal was a bit poor, perhaps being exposed the other way, but it's his assisting in the air, assisting in general play, it's the toughness, it's just everything that we grew to love about DBJ 5.5 to 6 years ago. And we're seeing it again, and he's clearly contributing to our performance. And I brought it up while he was a forward, but like also out of form as well. Like the senior leadership part of it as well. Like, we need a DBJ to be in form or playing consistently well to usher in the next phase of our list. He's in that age bracket that all football clubs need players in that age bracket, and two, because they are sent players and coaches, again, who have been in the system, treat them like on-field coaches, because we don't have any timeouts and all of that stuff in Australian rules football. So your leaders on field are worth their weight in gold. And again, the intangibles, Eddie Corns, while he was on, asked about Willem Drury, and I kind of said you'd have to ask them, because it would have to be apart from the things that are obvious on the stat sheet that person to person may not value as much as others. It's the intangibles that you have no idea about, whether it be on the training track or on game day. Setting up your teammates, telling them where to position themselves, encouragement, all of those things, constructive criticism, and all of those things that we would have zero insight into whatsoever. You need those players, and for me, I'm just so happy that DBJ has been challenged to go back. I mean, and he was put back this year to help because we were suffering a bit from an injury point of view. But again, as he's clearly done now a couple of times in his career, he's taken that challenge on with both hands, and he's progressed and excelled from that point. As a supporter of the club, and the way that I support the people involved in my club, I always want the best for them, and I'm just rapt that he is getting back into that mode where he's super reliable and super effective in his position.
Yeah. He is. I think he's one of the. It's funny. We were talking about. I think when we were doing the preview, we were talking about who's who's being picked in different positions, and obviously DBJ was talking about his forward line position. And at that point, we didn't know how good Durden was going to be, but it's like we never would have thought. At the moment when you're picking your back line, beyond Alir, Asava. Beyond Alir and Asava, maybe Alir's the only one that's locked in the team sheet as out and out number one, because Asava's obviously been informed for a couple of weeks now since coming back from injury, so he's locking himself in there. But beyond those two, you're probably going DBJ's your first of the smaller halfback kind of defenders. I know Kane Farrell as well, but DBJ is the one that I actually have the most trust in as a leader back there and doing the thing, playing his role and doing his role to the nth degree that you need him to do it. He's probably one of the first in the team sheet at this point, and that just shows how long a football season is, that these kind of swings and roundabouts can happen. And then 10 weeks ago he's a forward, now I'm like, oh, he's one of the first picked on the back line at this point, based on the way we're playing and the role he's been given.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, Farrell. Yeah, when you're talking about names on sheets, yeah, it's kind of
just some pretty good ones.
First out of Farrell and DBJ, yeah, because you're not leaving Farrell out of it, but I tend to trust DBJ more, say, in a contest, which I think maybe is where you're coming from a little bit, from a defensive point of view, and then at the end of this game, DBJ has 10 intercept possessions to Farrell's 5, 2 intercept marks to Farrell's 1, so that probably would go to that, and it's not to hang shit on Kane Farrell, because he has a role, and I thought he played a good game as well. Kane Farrell,
it's very different
as well.
Role. They played very different roles, even though they're maybe similar sized, guys, so to speak. They're being tasked with two very different roles. So to that point, like it's like, I trust. I think DBJ, just for what he's doing at the moment, is really performing his role to a degree that I'm really, really impressed with, and is getting his name into the best player discussions, and he's getting a coach's vote here and there as well. So those things are happening for him, and that kind of speaks to how everyone's seeing his game and kind of the form he's in, which is just really, again, really impressive considering the ups and downs he's had with his positional change. He's just gone back there and seamlessly fitted in, which is really, really impressive for him. Is there anything else? I mean, I know we just touched on Kane Farrell, but I don't think I have anything spectacular to say about him. He had some nice, I think he had a really nice kick. When I was talking about the Jace Burgoyne moment earlier, that kick from Farrell to open that up for Burgoyne was fucking beautiful. Like he's over 600 meters gained and had that game.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, like he did what we want from him in a game that we almost beat Sydney in. So, it's
he's going at 85%. Like,
yeah. I think the defensive structure worked okay. Like we just had, again, it just came down to moments of, whether it be Aaliyah turning one over or Asava dropping a mark he often takes. It was moments, but the overall as a structure and what they did a lot of the time worked okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think the overall structure was pretty good. And again, like I said, we end the round, and at this point of the season, we're still top 3 club. We're the third best club for what we do without the football, and we're up in the upper echelons for defensive structure. Josh Carr was obviously on AFL 360 on Coach's Night early this week, last night, as we're recording on Tuesday, the 16th of June. And they brought up all the kind of defensive stats, and, we're top 1 for this, top 5 for that. Silly me tried to screenshot it, forgetting that KO are a bunch of fuckwits and they don't let you screenshot. It just turns out to be a black screen. So apologies for the vagueness of those statistics, but they're all things that we'll probably discuss.
If you let me cut in for a second, I did take a photo of it and forgot. So that's
you got to take a photo of the TV. That's where we're at.
Get your phone out. Here's on YouTube. Here's my phone and my Zach Butter sticker on the back, which is because there's a crack in the back of my phone from, I think it was when I was on vacation in Scotland. I was drunk and stumbled and cracked the back of my phone. But those stats they brought up was points against, 5th in the comp, midfield intercepts, 4th in the comp, defensive 50 to inside 50 against, number 1 in the comp, defensive mid to inside 50 against, number 5 in the comp, and number 5 in the comp for pressure overall as well. So that's across the season. So those are some really good numbers.
In saying that though, if I was to enter the defensive review, I think our two key pillars in the back line would probably be the most critical of their own performances, if I can put it that way. Aaliyah and Asava had fantastic moments, and they both had their fair share of intercept possessions themselves. And Aliir spent his 100% time on ground, as we know. Their disposal efficiency was above 75%. Mark, they had some good statistics. Unfortunately, though, I think they would both concede that they gave up goals. They gave up goals directly from their mistakes, whether it be the weirdness in Aliir's games, some of his games this year, where he looks dynamite as a defender, and then with ball in hand, just makes some bewildering decisions on a couple of occasions. Unfortunately, like that one at the end of the first quarter, and most of these times it came from him wanting to kick the ball 70, 60 meters for some reason and going for a long option that wasn't in his repertoire in terms of distance when he had short options on. And it had me pulling my hair out on the night because in my seat, I have a pretty good vantage point, and I know it's not what the players see, so that's why I try and temper my judgment, because players on the field just see it would seem like 100 players just standing in front of them, and you got to try and pick gaps out of that. But from my vantage point, I'm just going, you got short options everywhere, particularly when you're managing the clock at the end of the first quarter. But yeah, there was at least one other occasion where a kick just was a direct turnover, and for all intents and purposes, we were out. And Asava, he had his press conference last week, and he mentioned that Charlie Curnow liked to get out in a lead, so he would preference the contest over everything else, and would hope to get Charlie in a contest. But I actually think he let himself down on a couple of occasions in the contest with Charlie Curnow, and again, not to take away entirely from their whole game, but to reiterate, I think they would probably concede that at least a couple of Sydney's goals would come down to some poor execution or some poor defensive integrity on their behalves. And then we can highlight the efforts from our youth, and again highlight DBJ from a senior point of view, but Aliir particularly is definitely in that senior bracket. Asava's in that midway bracket, but he's getting into his late 20s. And he's put enough good performances on the board that even against the Charlie Curnow, there was probably one or two moments where I thought he could have been a bit stronger in the contest, and probably negated one or two goals himself.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of those ones he attacked well, and it's those sliding doors, mate. There was one, I think it might have been in the first quarter, I think, because Curnow kicks the opener, I'm pretty sure, and it's a tumbling ball inside 50, and Asava kind of gets front position and attacks it and tries to take it at the ground level, which is always maybe a bit fraught with danger, but I respect the fact he has a go at it, but it kind of just gets below his hands, and then his weight's going forward, and Curnow's behind, and it's just like, that one again was pretty close to my vantage point, and I just was like, oh well, that's done, unless Curnow like double grasps it, but he's not going to do that. He's going to see the line and go for it, and it was moments like that, and that's why the criticism's there, but then I go, well, some of the moments that they got most exposed was some of those one-on-ones where we do want them. They're paid to. That's what they're there for. That's why the big guys are there. Is they're there to do that. So they do fail in those moments. But then I sit there and still go, we lost the game by 3 points, and we overall as a team, restricted Sydney to far less than what their output has been at times this year, and particularly when they're playing a team that, when you look at the ladder, we're objectively the fourth worst team in the competition. Sydney would have been maybe thinking. I think Sydney would have actually come into the game giving us a fair amount of respect, because Port Adelaide, I think, is known across the competition now, particularly with the media of the last 48, 72 hours, is, the perfect tank or whatever it is. We're fairly well known now for being a team that isn't maybe is a team that is hard out for our position in the league, but still we had some moments there that you're right. They'd want back, but I guess that's what when you put those senior guys in those positions, sometimes they're going to get bent. Like last year, Asava has an incredible game, and Curnow can't get anything right. Curnow has probably similar limited opportunities in this game, but just he kicks through. Like it's one of those swings and roundabouts parts of the one-on-one defensive forward thing. Is like sometimes you're going to win them, sometimes you're going to lose them, and I think none of them got off the leash to really. I never felt like we were getting dominated by any of those guys. It's just they had their moments in little moments in a close game
and took their moments.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas we maybe didn't as much, which is again the fine margins in a close game. I think a major part of talking about the defensive effort against Sydney, of course, goes to moving to our midfield discussion, which and of course other areas of the game too. But I can't. I want to start with. I mean, I'm sure there's a few of these guys that are going to come up in the votes later, but I'm trying to mention a few more as we go through the review as well, because I think it's important to talk about them in the line review as well. I want to start on a guy that has us winning the Dan Houston trade. Maybe I'm saying that facetiously, maybe I'm not. But Joe Richards, I put up a graphic on the socials yesterday because I really wanted to highlight it for people that maybe hadn't caught the stats and don't look into it as deep after a game. And I just and it goes to a macro of the midfield dynamism we're looking for. And I think the coaches have talked about this in the post match as well. Certainly Carr has, and a few others have talked about it. And I'm just looking for a little bit of dynamism and maybe intelligence in the ball movement as well. They've talked about Joe Richards being a guy that can use the ball quite quickly and intelligently with both hands and both feet. So he's kind of like a unique player in that aspect. He's kind of calm and composed and throws his weight around pretty well for the size that he is. And he had a game when he's thrown into a game like this against a very, very good team, obviously, and has they gave him a lot of responsibility here. Obviously, he's the top-rated player on the ground in this game, and is the 8th highest-rated player in the AFL for the week as well. I just want to go to the CBA numbers because I actually think I didn't realize how much of the time he spent in the middle, but essentially he was obviously Jordan Sweet was 83% of time at the CBA. Jason horne-francis is 77, and Joe Richards is third at 67. Zach Butters was actually our 4th most CBA attended player at 63. So. It's actually
conspiracy.
Not I did have this thought, and look, it's not for the 3-4 years down the track what our midfield mix is or whatever. But I did sit there and think, look, they're going to want to start looking at whatever they know about what Zach Butters' future is. They want to start looking at their options going forward, and the Joe Richards going into the middle, similar size. You could look at him and say similar size, similar quick thinking players. Not obviously Zach Butters is one of the top 5 players in the competition on all metrics. But you look at what Joe Richards was doing. He does some of those things just in maybe a little bit more of a workman-like fashion, and I was really impressed with his impact on the game, and I think his dynamism and his ability, his work rate going both ways to do what he does. I think it is opening up an intriguing extra wrinkle in our midfield, which is pleasing to see, and obviously almost helped us. I mean, we beat them at stoppage and even them up at centre clearance, and we our midfield game was on par with theirs, maybe beyond a few disposal moments going both ways.
What's not to like? Yeah, and in particular, Joe Richards. We spoke last week about JHF's impact per possession and that discussion, and I think that's what we got out of Joe in this game in particular was value for possessions. 23 he ends up on. He's gone at 82.6% disposal efficiency and just under 400 meters gained. On top of the others, which we can probably get into at some stage in this podcast. Don't know where. Maybe later. But yeah, he's like, all you want is, well, if I'm putting my coach's hat on, is to if you're making a change or you're challenging a player to play in a new position or take on a new role, you want to see them progressively improve. And that's precisely what Joe has done, and he's taken it like a duck to water. Like you said, a bit of dynamism, but a bit of intelligence as well. He is a bit more, he is that mature product. He's got a little bit of life experience behind him. Don't know if that's an irrelevant comment or not, but just felt like saying it. And he is spreading the load, because that seems to be what it's all about at the moment for our midfield. I know we are pretty intent on getting the mix right. And then we've just thrown another person into the mix. But what the returns that we're getting, and to be honest, as a forward, he was doing a lot of running for very little reward. And funnily enough, on Kimbo and the Chad on SNSA today, being the 16th of June, Tuesday, he mentioned that he's probably doing less running, but more of his body is sore rather than just his legs from a running capacity, small forward point of view. But as well as that, the returns that we're getting, that Gold Coast game was obviously a highlight, and he probably did have a bit of a blend, but obviously still more forward, and he kicked the 3 goals too, whatever. Had a fantastic forwards game, but I think as a small forward, we as a football club probably weren't getting the returns from a goal point of view that we probably would want, with now the amount of time that he's spent in our system. But we're all cognizant to the fact that he was a good runner, typically a good user of the football, has defensive integrity in his game. So the midfield decision is a good one. He's getting possessions. He can actually make an impact on the game, and he can dispose it to people to then put the score on the board. And funnily enough, he finds himself with the goal scoring opportunity because he's still around stoppage, and he's moving all around the ground. So he's still going to get his forward opportunities, but we're just kind of franking his attributes to make a more positive impact on our overall game. I did think it was very interesting, and I was very cognizant to the fact that Zach Butters didn't start in the first CBA of the game, and it was, in fact, Joe Richards and co who were, which again could play into a conspiracy theory of the club knowing what Zach wants to do already. But fantastic game. Next to no notes. He was a bit quiet in the third quarter. Probably got a bit of attention. I'm not really aware of that. But his entire game as a whole was all you could ask for.
Yeah, it really was. And for someone who's really only getting his first few weeks, of proper experience and being exposed there is really, really promising. And the fact is, you could say, his third quarter was a bit quiet, but he bounces back and has a pretty good fourth quarter, and his first and second quarters were really, really good. And it is rare for players, particularly of Joe Richards Zach Butters is still going to demand the predominant amount of ball use. Your Jason Horne-Francis as well, your Drews, etc. And you look at the players that had good highly decently rated third quarters. Drew and Butters both did, whereas Joe Richards was higher rated in this first, second, and fourth quarter over Zach Butters. So possessions and like where you are on the field, sometimes there's only a certain amount of possessions per game to go around players. Yes, there's a range of possessions per game for each team, but it was generally a finite amount of ball use that is going to happen in each game. So players are going to get their touches, and it's the same as a lot of basketball analogies tonight. But basketball, there's a lot of basketball analysts with a basketball game being only five players starting on a court, and then obviously bench players coming on, that there was only a certain amount of possessions available each game for players to use. So when you've got different players running through the engine room of whether it be a basketball team or a football team, there's going to be ball use. There's going to be a finite amount of ball use that each player gets. And so there's going to be ebbs and flows, particularly with a player like Joe Richards, who isn't the out and out star of the team. There's obviously some players that are have far more star power than he does, but I'll be fucking here for if he does build his star power, because he is showing the signs that he can be kind of that cult hero underrated, but very, very highly skilled, highly intelligent player that can run through the midfield and be a player for us, and a little bit of a utility maybe, but he actually played a pretty high percentage game and showed us a lot of stuff in this one. I'm kind of very, very buoyed by it. I know it's been talked about for a few weeks, and particularly talked about Kimbo and the Chad. That they've been talking about it for a few weeks before he started getting his chance. And I'm sure they're pretty cock a hoop about it, and in seeing that he's actually getting his chance and getting his rewards for those efforts. Is obviously changing the mix. Your Willem Drews and your Willem Drew in particular has been pushed out a little bit more, but I still think he has an okay game. And I think it was interesting. You talked about watching the post-match presser of Dean Cox. I assume you then watched the Josh Carr one, where it was asked a little bit about Willem Drew and his position in the team, and Josh Carr was kind of quite bullish about what they see and whether there is any outside noise that he was alluding to, but he kind of mentioned he's just like, it doesn't matter what people see. Like, we see things that he does and his leadership on field, and some of the things that we want him to do is exactly what Willem Drew is doing. So for those, I mean, we're obviously big Willem Drew fans. So for those that aren't, there is the coaches I think they're alluding to the fact that they're like, I know we see there's some noise there, but what we want him to do, both obviously with the football and whatever else, but as a leader on field, I think they're getting what they want out of Willem Drew, and the fact that he's kind of probably sacrificing a little bit with some of these changes that are happening to the mix as well.
Which is a noble quality. If you're sacrificing yourself for the betterment of the team, you are the ultimate team man, in a men's setting, of course. But just to quickly prattle off a few things. Equal second for 1%ers, Willem Drew. Top for tackles, top for pressure acts, and sixth for contested possessions. So, yeah, he's got his role. I thought he had a pretty good game. I'm pretty sure his champion data rating was actually pretty good at, what was it, 13.8 at the end of the game. I'm pretty sure he had one of the higher ratings partway through the game, maybe at halftime. But he does have his role. But just,
I think at one point they mentioned in the commentary the top. Sorry, just because you said that. Yeah, they did at one point in the commentary. It might have been into the third quarter. Mention the top four players in the game at that point were Port players, and Drew was mentioned in there. I'm pretty sure. So
yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking of too. Yeah. So everyone has their role to play, and I mentioned the intangibles in regards to DBJ, and yeah, you have. It's a bit similar to people, the average footy fan, just expecting every midfielder to get 25 to 30, or every player on the field to get 25 disposals, and it's just sport's not played that way. Games of football aren't played that way. You have your out and out stars and your main focal points, but then you have your layers underneath that. So I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater in that regard, and clearly there's a leadership factor that I think you mentioned as well that would play into it as well. Joe Richards definitely has established himself. That's for sure. Just to go back on that tangent while I nearly flipped my desk in excitement. I also wanted to highlight Jordan Sweet's game though. Coming up against one of his biggest challenges for the season so far, and I don't think he let himself down really in the slightest, although he gave away a number of free kicks, which you could argue is quite unfair. I know there's definitely 2 or 3 that quickly come to mind that I deem pretty unfair. The center line.
Can we argue about that for a second? As in, not you and I.
If you, yeah, let's lay it all out there.
Well, obviously the one on, I can't remember who it was, but there was the one in the first quarter where was it Caden Cleary? He lands on, because there's literally only one option. I think this has been talked about in some talk shows as well, about the umpiring and MRO stuff, about when a player literally only has one option to contest the ball. What the fuck are they meant to do? if Caden Cleary goes to the ground kind of hovering over the ball and Jordan Sweet comes over the top to tackle, like he literally only has one option, which is drop down and tackle him. And he actually doesn't. He doesn't drop down with force. He just goes down. Jordan Sweet
He
actually
just
has
pins him on the ground.
Yeah, and then they pay the free against him for unknown reasons still. Another one of those frees was a late, I think a downfield free kick because he hits was it
Lloyd?
No, Lloyd late. Again,
Lloyd late.
like I think Rashid Lloyd late. Say that 3 times. And I think Rashudo kind of goes, "Oh, that was a brain fade from Sweet," and I just was like, you actually see him kind of start to pull up as he's getting to it because Lloyd's taking the kick, and he actually kind of almost tries to help him to the ground. Like if you watch it in slow, it's just like he's not like he's just come in like a steam train because he's hoping to affect the tackle. Yes, I can see why it's there, but again, I think it's one of those 50-50 ones that I think you and I talked off air that it's possibly in midfield just is play on. And then another one of those frees was Brody Grundy stopping and propping at the line at the center throw up, and Sweet coming in, jumping for the ball and going over the line, which is meant to be, as we've talked about, I think off air and on in the last few weeks, and just in discussion in text and whatever. Greg Swan has said that is apparently meant to be play on because if one player doesn't jump, then it's just play on. But Brody Grundy's just using a loophole in the rule, and that is still being allowed at the moment, where he can just run to the line and stop and allow the other player to continue over the line and give away a free kick, which isn't actually the way it's meant to work based on our understanding.
More like using the ineptitude of umpires to gain a free kick because they've been reminded of this rule at least twice this season and how it should be adjudicated, and yet and the commentary team was like, "Oh, did Sweet get a hand on the ball?" I don't think that is necessary discussion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because hypothetically, if Brody Grundy goes up, then they're both aiding in the hang time, and then they get the ball, they contest the ball on the way down. But Grundy doesn't afford Sweet that hang time because he decides to not contest the ball in the air. So therefore, play on. If you've made a genuine attempt at the contest, play on. And again, this isn't my opinion. This is the rule. That's the rule.
It is rewarding a player for just fucking bailing out on doing their job. That's what's so ridiculous about. Yeah,
in the preseason, it's smart by Grundy. It's smart to fox the opposition ruckman if it's going to gain you a free kick. He was red hot on it. Whether he thought of that or the Sydney coaching group thought of that early on in the season or the preseason, like, cool, good on you. But it quickly got established that if you're going to fox the ruckman and they're making a genuine attempt at the ruck contest, then we're not going to pay a free kick for that. And yet here we are. What round is it? 14?
Yeah. So anyway, there's 3 free kicks that we just argued about that take away from that. And I can't think of others, but Jordan, to your point, Jordan Sweet had a fantastic game. He's probably going to come up. He'll come up a little bit later again, I think. And I'm realizing the time. How have we got to an hour 40 into recording already?
Deep in philosophy, but I just, maybe just so that we can quickly go through maybe one of our 5 votes each. But I mentioned in our mid-season review with Eddie that Jordan Sweet has been in our best players for most of our games this season. And I mentioned that I didn't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And perhaps that was to humor our guest at the time in Eddie Corns. But in actual fact, I think it is a credit to Jordan Sweet and his season. He has put his best foot forward as soon as he's got back into the team in round 2, and he hasn't really looked back. I looked before, and he is 4th in the competition for hit-outs, and he is 3rd in the competition for hit-outs to advantage, which, as a ruckman, is your key statistic. On top of the fact that he's generally contributing in way of clearance, He also has 7 ground ball gets as a big man. He also had 13 contested possessions, which was the leading number on the ground. And just the fact that, like, Brodie Grundy and Jordan Sweet on the night, that was a fantastic battle between two good players in their role. You could look at Brodie Grundy's stats and go, you won the contest, but you could also look at the fact that Jordan Sweet hit the scoreboard and actually took Grundy into his defensive line and tested him in that regard and put the score on the board. You could argue that Jordan Sweet won the battle. The fact of the matter is he was tested by an elite ruckman. He beat him for hitouts on the night, and he beat him for hitouts to advantage on the night as well. So I don't think there's any underselling Jordan Sweet's influence. He may not be one of the competition's elite ruckmen, even though his key statistics suggest this year he is. At the very least, he is one of the competition's most consistent ruckmen. But as an extra layer to that, and it's something that we've lauded in his game, is just the fact that he is able to contribute to midfield chains of possession. Now, in talking about free kicks, I think a couple of times he got a bit ahead of himself by trying to take on the contest a bit too much. And again, first option is generally the best option, and particularly as a ruckman, like, we know what you can do, Jordan, but you don't have to do it all the time. And it's probably what Stewie Jew would have been telling him at the breaks. But honestly, considering it was one of his biggest tests, and he'll have a few more before the season's out, I think you can comfortably say that he passed the test. Again, you can argue as to who won the position, but funnily enough, I don't think either him nor Grundy lost their position, if you can understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I absolutely. I was literally just thinking I wanted to kind of tie off your point with the bow and say that, like, it was just one of the great kind of ruck battles in a tight game. You get a ruck battle between, Brodie Grundy's being highly lauded, and he's in the top 10 champion data. He's in the top 10 champion data player rated players at the moment, I think, or is he? I might be thinking of a different metric. I think he's up there though. May not be champion data. He's up there in some rankings of, and so he's having like the best period of his career, like a renaissance of his career, that has been somewhat of a journeyman at times since his time at Collingwood, and particularly with the new era of ruck, like they're talking about what he's doing up there as it would in glowing lights. So, and Jordan Sweet's still, going into this year, he didn't keep his spot for round one. Like, so this is the kind of journey he's been on this year, and he comes up against Brodie Grundy and has a battle that, yes, you can say, well, who won the position? We don't know, but no one lost the position. Now, I think actually Jordan Sweet, for me, had one of his best games in portcolours, considering the opposition, considering the occasion. Yes, he gives away a couple of holding the ball free kicks for maybe just taking it on a little bit too much, but he also kicks a couple of goals out of getting into the right positions and taking the game on in a way as well. So, there's things he's doing that are, there's a little bit of a vibes, basically. Like, he provides incredible. There's something about the way Jordan Sweet carries himself on field, particularly since he got dropped at the start of the season. There's a bit of a swag that he's carrying himself with like a chip on his shoulder. I think you've mentioned it a couple of times this year as well, that he's carrying that since then. He's wanting to prove that he should not be dropped again for the foreseeable future. However long his career is going to go, he's like, I want to be the man.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a credit to him.
Mm-hmm. And we love a Port fan as well. The Port fan playing for his club, that's good shit. So, yeah, good vibes. Yeah. We've got to touch on one before. I know it's going a little bit, we might go a little bit longer on this one, but Xavier Bammett, of course, makes his debut. And, he has some moments in this game where there's a couple of maybe clangers. Though I think there's mitigating circumstances to a few of them, but his intelligence and his ability to be at the drop of the ball or where the ball is going to be, a couple of 1%ers. Obviously, the goal was fantastic. there's a definite rawness to his AFL experience, which is understandable, being he was literally not an AFL player 2 weeks ago. So, fucking he's got a big out there. But overall, like, he didn't shy away from the contest nor like the limelight. He whether it be the Jace Burgoyne marking contest that he somewhat interrupts, but he's actually the one on replay. You watch him, he actually starts to try to back out of it, and Burgoyne maybe should still take the mark. Is my criticism of that one. But Bamet's like, because that one again was right in front of my vantage point. Bamet's like repeatedly, he's going arms up like, I'm sorry. Like, he's like feeling the and everyone goes to him and gives him. But I think overall, I think that was a debut. As much as there's the rawness in it, you saw a lot of what they like about it. And geez, he's a good sized bloke out there. And there's a little bit of the way he kind of carries his shoulders forward. There's a little bit of the way he moves. It kind of just reminds me of that Sam Powell-Pepper kind of movement, like just big shoulders, slightly, almost bald head, just the way he moves.
He's a ruffian.
Obviously the goal was fantastic, a fantastic moment. The little roar of affirmation the crowd gave a few times when he got around the ball and had a few good moments was really fun as well.
It was like a pseudo Wilson Gray for me live. Was just the cheers that he received just purely by getting the ball. And how good would that be? You're debuting at home. He mentioned after he got drafted, like, he obviously likes Never Tear Us Apart from a distance in Victoria, just watching TV and stuff. So he gets to debut at home, gets to experience that, and then he just picks up the ball on the ground, and he's got 25,000 people cheering for him. Like, that'd be just an awesome feeling. And on top of the fact, like you said, he didn't seem overawed by and large by the proposition, albeit a couple of inexperienced player moments, and the one with Jace Burgoyne. You see those happen from time to time, and you just immediately want your time back, don't you? And then there was the 50-meter penalty, which everyone can understand what happened. It's unfortunate. And because we're affected, I'm just going to get on my soapbox and say, why the fuck are you blowing your whistle and saying move it on as an umpire? You just shut up and say play on when the player needs to play on, in my opinion. Or if you're reminding them of, so what have they got? 8 seconds to dispose of it. If you want to remind them that their time's nearly up, tell them that 6 seconds has passed. I just think
Don't blow the
whistle and the move it on is redundant. And I understand the opposition fans are just going, that's what they say. It happens every game. Or that I get that. I'm just saying that was a clear example of the redundant nature of whistle, move it on, not meaning play on, which seems fucking ridiculous to me. So again, I think we can all see what happened, and we don't necessarily blame a first gamer who his head would have been spinning, crowds baying for blood already with the umpires, and waxing lyrical, being parochial as we always are, and unfortunately it costs us a goal in a game where we lose by under a goal.
Mm-hmm. We're all taught to play the whistle, and I don't know why a whistle's being blown when nothing's happening, because that's essentially
when play's still dead. Yes,
play is dead. So if the whistle's being blown, then because you can see Bamet's kind of eyes are darting from player to umpire, and he hears the whistle and goes. Like, that's what makes, again, like, I'm not going to blame, put 50% of blame on umpires, 50% on the AFL. Man, this game's so fucking dumbly difficult with the way they've tinkered with things. And I don't mind tinkering. That's a separate discussion. Tinkering happens in all sports every year. That happens, but it's the way they feed that down to the game itself is just like they just overdo it and make it so hard. But the umpire should have just, I don't know. It's just such a weird situation to blow a whistle because blowing a whistle means something is happening. So if you're just saying blowing the whistle to tell the player to move it on, then that's not the whistle is meant to indicate.
Just tell the player, Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not deep in the weeds of umpire protocols because I know they blow the whistle a certain amount of times for time on and time off. But again, we can all see what happened, and it's an example of one element of either umpiring or Australian rules at the elite level that is redundant. That doesn't need to happen, and no one would care if the umpires weren't required to do that anymore, and they would just all they simply needed to do was blow the whistle and signal play on, which is what the players are fucking waiting for, and fans.
I think, yeah, because all of us in the stand, because that one was very, very close. That was almost right in front of my section there, and all of us were like, "What the fuck?" Like, no, the whistle went, and then like later on in replay, you hear what it said, and you go, "Okay, so there's some technicalities there," but at the end of the day, nothing highlights the kind of the web of confusion that is occurring in the AFL at the moment than a first gamer coming in from two weeks out of playing VFL football and not understanding what was going on in that moment. That kind of just shows, there's some inexperience in his end, but it also shows kind of how confusing the game is to kind of play under these circumstances. So, but yeah, overall, I take a lot of positives out of Bamet's. There's a lot of rawness to work on, but you can see the player that they've the reason they've drafted him. You can see the player that's there and kind of things he can add into the game because he added some hardness and he had some nice kicks and disposal. He went at 72% with his disposal. So he had a few nice kicks, nicely weighted kicks like down the wing, and just things that he did well were I appreciated. So I'll be interested to see how many more games he plays this year because obviously that rawness will mean. We saw last year when some guys came in, diminishing returns as the season went on. It would be interesting to see how that goes for him. But certainly, I have no problems with the fact that we drafted him and have given him an 18-month contract at this point. And I'm sure the club are already looking at what he's doing and thinking that might get that little, short-term extension to give him a bit of time to see what he can develop into. It's a nice little pick there.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely showed that there's something to work with, which is promising. And the Sam Powell Pepper or the Ollie Wines vibes definitely comes through when you see him roaming the field.
Yeah, which are good vibes to have roaming the field. All righty, we should, I think, move on to segments, even though I'm sure we could keep going with it because we're getting a little bit later on here in this episode. So we'll get onto the segments here in a moment. But of course, if you're listening, watching, however you're consuming the podcast, we encourage you to make sure you're subscribing and following on all the relevant podcast and or social media networks. So whether you listen to the podcast or watch it on YouTube, we appreciate you all. But whatever subscriptions you have, if you listen on Spotify but you have a YouTube account, go over and follow and like the videos there. Just all the follows and subscribes and all of those things help get the podcast out increasingly into the algorithms that are out there, the algorithms that are all predominantly supported by paid advertising, which we, of course, do not do. I would like to have the money to do that at some point to push it out to more people, but we don't at the moment, so we rely on word of mouth. So we'd appreciate you sharing the podcast as much as you can to your friends and family and everyone else. And, of course, like and subscribe to the social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where we post up the little bits of content from the podcast, as well as random stats that we enjoy. And a lot of people enjoy getting around them, and we enjoy the feedback from those as well. So thank you for everyone's support. It is appreciated, whether you be a Port Adelaide fan or you be a nuffy from another side that's coming into the Facebook comments as well. Whatever it be, it all feeds the algorithm, so we do enjoy it. Jamie enjoys moderating all those comments that come in, don't you, Jamie?
Some of them.
yeah. That's about it. All right, let's move on to the Wilson Gray.
Down, Gray doing brilliantly, getting through to Monfries. That's Gray at his best.
Wilson kicks hard and kicks cruelly.
Alrighty, Wilson Gray Award. Jamie gets to go first this week. I will just note that last week's winner was there was a close votes in both segments last week, which is really good. On the Instagram pages, of course, we're recording this on Tuesday, the 16th of June. It will be released on Wednesday morning, the 17th of June, and these segments will be in Instagram stories on Wednesday evening, probably around the time that State of Origin Game 2 is starting. So if you're sitting there watching State of Origin, get on Instagram and vote for your Wilson Gray and Goal of the Week. But Wilson Gray Award last week was won by the Durden Whitlock 1-2 on the wing. 59% of the vote went to that one, which is a close one over Jamie's nomination of Richard's really nice pressure on Harley Reid that affected Harley Reid's kick last week. So a nice close vote there on the Wilson Gray. Obviously, we'll get to the Wilson Gray nominations in a moment. There was a pretty close vote in the Goal of the Week last week as well. But Jamie, you get to go first. What's your Wilson Gray nomination for this week?
I'm sure you were the same, but I had a good-sized shortlist. And for me, the ones that I want to pick from are all kind of team-based. That's all contributions from a few players that make up a play. But I think I've been set on the Durden one-hander to have his shot at goal, but it's also Georgiadis who collects the ball on the flank, more centre half forward, a bit of shake and bake, and then hits it over the top with the left foot to Durden.
Richards wobbles one to half forward, bouncing ball. Georgiadis got there ahead of Hamling. He shook him, floats it. Durden, one arm. He just plucked it with one paw.
That was a good mark.
Creeping up the pressure in this game, and
Stakes. He's really agile, isn't he?
Yeah, look, that's a left foot. I mean, not many players can kick the ball properly on their left foot, let alone
But not only that, now the shot on goal is a separate topic, but just that play and how it eventuated, very important part of the game because Sydney had just kicked 3 goals straight as well. So we needed to answer, and we needed a good piece of play to get that opportunity. And so the George collect, shake and bake on the left, and then the Durden one-hander. Good piece of commentary too from the Fox team, and the crowd definitely felt how important it was in the moment as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there was. You're right. There was an extensive shortlist. That one was in one of mine in my shortlist as well. It was a game that sometimes we struggle to find the Wilson Grays in a game where we play really terribly. Probably happened more last year at times. Like this year, I think we've been doing okay. It's there was a lot in this one. I want to do a couple of honorable mentions to a couple of smothers because of the one I'm not going with a smother, but there was 2 smothers. Depending on what you went with, mine might have been one of these. But obviously, we're just talking about Xavier Bammett. He had a great smother. I think in the first quarter, it led to Jason Horne-Francis' first goal. Kind of just like real good attack on the ball, and there was a lot of confusion in the commentary about where the
good pickup by Joe Berry to get it to JHF as well.
Yeah,
just on
Joe
the Berry chat.
Very, very nice moments in this game. Yeah,
he did.
He's Joe Berry's good. He's not a bust. But Zach Butters had a really nice. Yeah, Zach Butters had a really nice smother on Logan McDonald after he'd given away a free. He just stayed with the play and smothered the ball and won the ball back in the second quarter, I believe it was. But I'm going to nominate Harrison Ram's tackle on Joel Amadi. I think it was in the third quarter, about 6 minutes and 20 seconds to go, kind of at half back. He kind of Joel Amadi takes the ball and kind of, I think he looks at Harrison Ram and goes, I think I can beat him. And Harrison Ram just lunges in and makes the tackle, and a beautiful tackle to catch him holding the ball.
Wicks squeezed, sends it down the flank, spills out the back of the contest. Amadi picks it up nicely, creates a bit of space, maybe tries to do too much, and the big boy gets him.
The battering Ram from half back. Got Bam Bam at one end.
And it ultimately ends up in a goal-scoring opportunity for us as well. So a really, really nice moment from
By who?
Ram, showing a little bit. Was it Zach Butters?
Joe Berry.
That was
unfortunately,
right?
Unfortunately, it was another mischance. But
that was a miss. Sorry, that's why I was like, I didn't have it noted clearly, and I was just like, maybe that's why. So yeah. But still, It ended up in
Sorry, we need to
an
wrap
important
this up.
moment. Yeah, no, that's good. It's good. It's good fleshing out of the moment. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that Harrison Ram tackle. It spoke to a little bit of what has been spoken about with him, that his athleticism, while he's still a bit raw and Bambi on skates a little bit, being a tall young man, he's still got a little bit of that in his game that we're already kind of enjoying. So I really, really enjoyed that moment. And yeah, Harrison Ram tackling Amadi for my Wilson Graham nomination. Jamie's gone with George kick to Durden one-hander, which is a very, very nice one as well. So I'll be interested to see how this one goes. The votes have been nice and close the last few weeks, which means I think it means we're picking reasonably good ones, or people are like, they're both shit and they're going between both. I don't know, but I'm choosing to believe that people think they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people love it. People love them. Just an honorable mention from me. It's just a Zach Butters moment, because we all love a Zach Butters moment in the third quarter as well, which, a few of these have come from premiership quarter type stuff, I guess. But yeah, there's a ball. Yeah, I think it's on our centre half forward line or in the centre, and Butters collects it, but then dives and kind of fires off a handball in midair. Just thought to DBJ, I think it was, who then got an inside 50. Just, yeah.
Is that
I remember
stuff?
I was watching the replay before, and when he did it, I audibly guffawed. I was because the Sydney players are going one way with the ball, and then Zach gets it, dives in midair, flicks it out, and it's just pure Zach Butters. But it's just an honourable mention because it is, it's a small little cool thing, but yeah, worth noting.
Yeah. No, there was some great moments in this game, and I think that speaks to the fact that it was a very, very good game of football for us, whether we lost or won, and for the neutrals as well. It was a very, very good game of football. Let's get to the goal of the week, which I think will be a similar moment. There was a few good goals in this one.
Monfries has kicked a goal. Unbelievable. Haven't seen anything like that. It's gone at right angle.
Flashpoint, Stevie Mobloff, what a time! He is floating on air now!
Alrighty, goal of the week. To mention last week's nomination wins again, it was a close one last week, as Joe Berry's quick gather finish, which I believe was your nomination, Jamie, was won with 56% of the vote over Jason Horne-Francis' ice cool finish in the fourth quarter. So 56% of the vote. Again, like I said, another close finish for those that vote last week, but Joe Berry's finish was very, very good and won goal of the week last week. This week, I get to go first, and I am nominating one that I very, very much enjoyed, and I did text Jamie about from my vantage point on the night. Our second goal of the game, about six and a half minutes to go in the first quarter. Jordan Sweet's standing one-step goal from almost 50 meters out, an absolute bomb. I think I sent Jamie a message. I said it's an absolute MOAB, which is an acronym for the mother of all bombs, which is actually a very, very bad thing that the US military uses. But it's the first thing that came to mind to describe Sweet's absolute launch from 50. So that's my nomination. I absolutely love that goal, and watching the replay, I loved it just as much. Just the fucking audacity.
Help around him as Sheldrick went to ground. Cunningham went to ground. Georgiades went the ball. Gave it to Sweet. He's already had a cider, and he gets that home. Sweet cider earlier, and he hit that Sweet this time.
If you don't mind, that's a huge start by Port.
Yeah, that's exactly the way they needed to start. And we said before the game, we think that Sydney would be a bit.
We're only a few years removed from Scott Lysett, just doing one from 35 on an angle, and it's Ruckman don't do that now. Jordan Sweet's kind of doing this semi-regularly. Is he at least having a pop and getting a couple of them? So Ruckman do that semi-regularly for us these days.
It was quite audacious, and I just like that it came after his set shot, which was pretty straight up and down set shot that he missed. And then, he's just got the ball in and around contest at 50 and just going, fuck it, I'll chuck it on the boot. And, gets the goal. But, definitely on my short list. Honourable mention to, Bam Bam on debut. always a nice moment when a debutant kicks their first goal. Durden's drought breaker in the first quarter, so obviously before Jordan's like a good build up. Obviously 6 behinds on the board, but a good build up. Berry again involved, and Ollie Wines. Ollie Wines under 60% game time, had the same amount of possessions as Joe Richards. Not going to spend any time on that, but just goes to show. Kari said maximum impact on low time on ground for Ollie, and seems to be happening more often than not for the Brownlow medalist. But I'm actually going to nominate Zach Butters' goal in the third quarter. I've written down here, Butters electrifies, and that's because there was definitely an air of tension in the air. Moving on. But the crowd were wound up. The umpiring was getting ridiculous. It was a joke. Sydney had hit the front until that Durden one-hander, and then he goaled. And then we'd followed it up with a behind. But just the eventuation of Zach Butters' goal, just the contest, it was in and around our 50. We needed to establish that margin again that we'd held for most of the game throughout the second quarter and before they'd kicked those 3 goals in a row in the third quarter. But Zach Butters getting that goal, I think, excuse me, I swung my arm in celebration so hard that I'm pretty sure my arm nearly came out of its socket. I cheered it that hard, but not only me. Watching the replay, just seeing the crowd just erupt in elation was fantastic, and again, just backed up how I was feeling in the moment and how important that goal was in the moment. And I immediately texted you and said that it's going to make me feel absolutely sick to see that in another Guernsey or something to that effect, because the goal itself, but to see his passion in the moment, and I just thought, how fucking good is this guy? How good was that? But how fucking bad is it going to be to see this shit happen potentially against us? But anyway, we can worry about that at a later date. Butters' goal to get back on the goal kicking list is my nomination.
Off hands, sweep with the flick over the top. Cochrane sizzles it. Burgoyne collects it. Butters, he shrugs. The $10 million man. Show me the money.
Hit the scoreboard a bit more. He sets up lots of goals, but this is what you want your captain to be able to do when you need it. Get onto the left and execute a goal like that. Fantastic shot by Zach, and good ground ball by Jace Burgoyne.
Teeny, the non-tackle too.
Yeah, he says, let me go, I'm going to finish this.
Show me the money.
Yeah, no, a very, very good nomination. It was very, very close to my shortlist as well. It might have been second on mine as well. So, yeah, and to top it off, it was Isaac Heaney that he shook off in the tackle as well, which is just like, you know, you kind of you add those little things in moments. Again, talking about a lot of basketball this week, there's little moments in the NBA series where it's just like who the shot was against, like Jalen Brunson shooting, like launching one over Victor Wembanyama kind of adds to the degree of difficulty. And when Zach Butters, the tackler, is Isaac Heaney, and he just kind of shrugs him off a bit and like he uses his pace to just, you know, leave Isaac Heaney in his absolute dust and snap one through. Just a really, really nice, like picturesque goal, so to speak. So, you know, good nomination from you. We're going to be a really, really interesting vote this week on that one, because I think those are 2 very, very good ones from 2 guys that got a lot of love out of that game. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those votes go. Let's get to our Player of the Year votes.
Now it's time for the CREEDCAST Player of the Year voting.
Alrighty, Player of the Year voting. Jamie gets to go first this week. Of course, 5-3-1 voting. 5 being best on field, 1 being our 5th best on field. We don't know who each other are going to vote for each week. So Jamie gets to go first this week, and then I will say my votes after. Over to you, Jamie. Yeah, Player of the Year voting.
Player of the Year voting. And we have our metrics, and we value different things throughout the game, but throughout different games and the context of the games and the way that players have had. But my votes all similarly match the top 5 rated players on the field for Port Adelaide. For mine, it's not in the same order. So my one vote goes to JHF, to Jeff.
Yeah.
And that's because although he had a 16 disposal game, I think it's that impact per possession discussion that comes into it. 12 kicks. He went at 81%, which is a nice increase on some of his recent form in terms of his disposal efficiency, getting back to what I think we all think of him in the way he uses the ball. Just under 250 meters gain. He had 6 marks, 4 clearances, 2 goals, obviously, and a goal assist in his 6 score involvements, 4 inside 50s, 3 tackles, but he also had 20 pressure acts as well, which I think rounded off his game. He was working both sides of the ball, which was nice to see. Only the handful of tackles, but in a game where I think Willem Drew led our tackles with 5. So all a fairly even contribution from that statistical marker. 2 votes I've actually given to DBJ. We spoke very highly of his game before, but the next 3 I think probably deserve higher pegging. But yeah, DBJ, we went through a couple of them, but 25 disposals, 10 intercepts, 7 ground ball gets, going at 84% disposal efficiency, 360 odd meters gained, 5 marks, 3 score involvements, 2 inside 50s, 6 rebounds, 13 pressure acts, and 3 1%ers. So a good all-round DBJ halfbackers, senior leadership type of game. 3 votes goes to Jordan Sweet. Waxed lyrical about him before as well, but think he ends up as our 3rd best on ground. 35 hitouts, 9 to advantage, 17 disposals, 13 contested, 7 ground ball gets for the big man, which I think I mentioned before, 385 meters gained, 4 marks, 9 clearances, 8 score launches, which for a ruckman tend to get score launches because a hit out counts as a score launch, but 8 is still pretty noteworthy. 2 goals, 1. He had 13 score involvements, which was by far the highest number for Port Adelaide. 4 tackles, 18 pressure acts, and also had 3 1%ers. So Jordan Sweet is in some very good form, and him being in the best players is a positive. Jamie from the mid-season review. 4 votes I've given to Joe Richards. He ends up our champion data top-rated player, but I believe that Zach Butters, if you look at his statistics, and while his disposal efficiency is slightly lower than Joe, I think Butters still ends up on top. So Joe Richards, 23 disposals, and for those on Facebook, you would have seen all of these already. 12 contested, 10 ground ball gets, 13 kicks out of his 23 disposals, going at 82.6% disposal efficiency, just under 400 meters, 9 marks, 7 clearances, a goal, 7 score involvements, 5 inside 50s, 4 tackles, 21 pressure acts. Now, Zach Butters, 27 disposals, 11 contested, 6 intercept possessions, 6 ground ball gets, 17 kicks out of his 27, going at 77%, 340 meters. He also kicked the goal. He had 9 score involvements, 4 clearances, I believe, all from the center, if I'm not mistaking that with JHF, 5 inside 50s, 5 tackles, and 23 pressure acts. He also had 2 goal assists, which were, if I just buffer here. So what did we kick in the last quarter? We hit 3 goals. 2 of those were from Zach Butters' direct goal assists in a time where we sorely needed those shots on goal after Sydney had kicked 4 goals straight to really punch us in the mouth in that 4th quarter. So I think while Joe Richards had a fantastic game and added another level and took another step in his midfield journey and is the champion data top-rated player for us, I think the leadership of Zach Butters across the whole game, and particularly in that final stanza, just gets his nose in front for me.
Yeah. It's an interesting mix of votes there. I think with the first two, I was like, "Are we going to Yahtzee?" But then it flips up a little bit. So my one vote obviously goes to GF as well, JHF. I think the discussion we've both had in the last few weeks about impact per possession is very, very true. The fact he's impacting the score, but his goal kicking just quietly has been very quite good. Like his set shot kicking and everything has been reasonable. I know we had a period of the yips maybe last year or something at some point, but yeah, very, very good. DBJ with 2 votes. The real big swing. This happens sometimes with me and Jamie, and just how we rate things. I've got Butters as my third best. It's a very, very close top 3, but
so close.
I guess maybe
such a close top 3.
It is. It was very, very hard to separate and figure out where I wanted to reward things. But I think I just looked at maybe I'm getting it was a little bit too letting the analytics lead me. But I just looked at Joe Richards' game overall and just was like, and just maybe my expectation versus reality, like 500 Days of Summer thing. Like
it's where the bar is. Yeah.
It's like I went into the party like hoping that Joe Richards was going to do something, and he actually did instead of the whole 500 Days of Summer thing. So Joe Richards just did incredible things. So Zach Butters also did, but I was looking at Willow ratings, and Joe Richards exceeds Zach Butters for 3 or 4 quarters, so that was part of it. And then the overall rating, Butters is probably more even across the 4 quarters though, so there is that part of it. So it is all just what you want to reward, but maybe the fact that Joe Richards' inexperience in the midfield, but he still has the performance he does, is probably what leads me to where I get to. Sorry, I should actually say what my votes ended up at. So Butters was my third best on. I had Sweet in 4, and I had Richards was my best on field. I just think for what the dynamism he provided, maybe a little bit of, I think a major factor of why we were involved in this game as deeply as we were was the fact that we threw him in there and he kind of was maybe an unexpected factor for Sydney to have to deal with as such a integral part of the engine room on the night that helped us kind of battle the way we did in this game and overall just some of the midfield dynamism that we showed and an extra wrinkle. So how that continues throughout the year, once teams start locking in on the fact that maybe we're using Joe Richards in the middle a little bit more, again, there could be a diminishing returns thing depending on how Richards adapts to if he does get given this role more and more. So that remains to be seen. But in this game, I thought he was very, very good. And considering the opposition, one of the best midfielders in the comp that he can come up against, I think it was a very, very good performance from him as well. Of course, I had Jordan Sweet in my 4 spot as well. I think I kind of alluded to it before. I think Jordan Sweet playing against Brodie Grundy in a game of this magnitude, playing the way he did, I think it's actually one of Jordan Sweet's best games in portcolours. He held his own against one of the premier ruckmen in the competition and actually beat him in a few categories and hit the impact of the scoreboard, had an incredible hit out night and just overall did some things. Obviously, we talked about the free kick stuff. Some of those come from him trying to play the way that we want him to play. Some of those come from a bit of bad luck as well. So I think there's a very, very good game from Jordan Sweet there. And I agree with your point that in games like this, you look at it and go, Jordan Sweet being in our best players is a good thing. It's kind of like he's starting to get to that point where if he has games like this, you're happy with him being in the best players. That's a good thing, A lot of other teams in the competition are very, very happy with their ruckman being in the best players, and I'd like to be there, and I'm happy with that being the case today.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm totally on the same page. Like, yeah, us having our ruckman in the best players doesn't suggest that the team below has had a poor night. It just shows how good of a ruckman we actually have in our ranks and should appreciate. So yeah, I don't disagree with your votes. It is a very tight top 3, and yeah, we kind of have the same structure as the coaches' votes. And again, I think we've mentioned it once or twice before. Over the 30 votes that we can cast, I think they all end up in totality where they probably should.
Yeah. No, very, very good. It's nice to have a set of votes and a loss that we struggle with, but because we're trying to reward a lot of things rather than struggling to get 5 players we think we're good on the day, which is a problem we've had at times, particularly in the dark days of last year. Yeah. All right, let's close off this episode for the last few minutes here and just talk about the brief of what we've got ahead this week. We've, of course, got a game against Collingwood in Melbourne at the MCG wearing the fully charged Guernsey, which is going to be lots of fun to see run around. It's going to be a very, very fun Guernsey matchup, watching that till. It's going to be the most till we've run around in since we were forced to wear a training Guernsey back in, 2002 or whatever it was, against Collingwood. So it's like finally we're actually wearing teal because we want to against them, which is going to be fun. But yeah, this Saturday, the 20th, and the Saturday night game in Melbourne, I think 7:05 local time, obviously half an hour later over there. For those intrepid travellers that may be heading to the MCG to watch us, hopefully finally have a decent game against Collingwood at the MCG. It's a really intriguing match in the fact that the last two times we've played over there have been absolutely demolished by them, more or less, in kind of the waning years of the Ken Hinkley era. What the Josh Carr era and the defensive solidarity we've got means for a game against the Collingwood side that is in a similar, not in a similar spot, but just on the, are they getting Lockie Neal? Are they going to go again, or are they just a fading force? What Collingwood are they? It's a really intriguing matchup this week. A few obviously we'll do our major preview on Thursday evening and out on Friday, but Josh Lai is out of protocols and available for selection. So that's obviously one up for selection there. And then obviously out of the game that we've had, there's maybe a few selection calls to be made about what the forward line mix is. And then, of course, if Josh Lai is to come back in, what that changes for the defensive mix as well.
Yeah, we've kept everyone hanging here for over 2 hours and 20 minutes. So, save a lot for the preview. But Collingwood are gettable. I think that's pretty obvious. They're not having the season that they would want. They've got a few key injuries, such as Moore, Maynard, and still Sidebottom's a bit iffy that they're managing throughout the season. And like you said, it's been fucking terrible the last couple of times we've been to the MCG. So it's a good opportunity to atone for some of that. I think it's probably in Josh Lai's best interest, and particularly with how our defense as a whole performed against Sydney, probably best to maybe bring him back through the Magpies. If not, give him another week, because 2 concussions in a month is pretty concerning. And, we want Josh Lai fit for the long term. I think this is a time where we're not desperate to bring him back. Unfortunately for him, he'll definitely come back before the season's out. I'm sure of it. But it's probably an opportunity to keep our powder dry in cautiousness for his health. In regards to Jack Lukosius and Xavier Walsh, for example, in terms of our forward stocks, although Lukosius has been pegged as a potential winger, they may come into consideration. Lukosius had a pretty decent game from what I saw against West Adelaide in the SANFL on the weekend. And Xavier Walsh has kicked 18 goals since moving from a defender earlier this season. So he's definitely putting pressure on either Todd Marshall or Jack Whitlock. And we are in a season where Josh Carr is wanting to see what the list has got. We've seen debuts in some sort of regularity this season. Not necessarily club debuts, but out-and-out debuts. Tom Anastasopoulos comes to mind in that regard, in a similar vein to seeing what we have on our list and what they have to offer. So it may be a good opportunity while Jack Whitlock or potentially Todd Marshall are waning in form and bringing in a guy that's actually been doing all you can do at SANFL level, who's been on our list for a decent amount of time now. And I'm sure Josh Carr would want to see what he's got to offer. So a couple of notes there. But yeah, we'll get into it in a bit more detail on Thursday night when we record.
Absolutely. And looking forward to it. It's always, going across the Melbourne to play Collingwood at the MCG always provides an intriguing matchup with the side they've got, some of the weapons they've got, and the what we're looking to develop out of our side this year. So I'm very, very much looking forward to it. Xavier Walsh, very, very big shoulders. The couple of times I've seen him down the sandful wandering.
He's aggressive
around,
too.
Impressive unit of a man. So it's an intriguing one to see if his name does get popped up there in the next few weeks. And this week indeed. Looking forward to it. Of course, thank you, Jamie, as always, for joining on the podcast and for particularly one of our longer ones in recent times. We're pretty good at keeping it to 2 hours, but this one provided a little bit more opportunity.
2024 called.
Yeah, 2024 called and wanted its Lord of the Rings length podcast back. Extended editions. Thank you for everyone that stuck through the pod to this point. You are the true, it's a still one from some SEN content. You are the true ballers. It's like, it's not 601ers. It's 2 hours and 26-minute inners. Like, that's what it is. Thank you for all the support. We appreciate it. Nothing more to say. Calm the fucking pair.
Calm the power. Have a good week, guys. See you later on.